Back room.
Suck my No, I'm not standing up.
Stop resisting.
I'm not resisting. I'm just not
Stand up.
I'm not standing. I don't have to stand.
Grace Mullane was a young woman who was tragically murdered in New Zealand in 2018 when she was just 21 years old. Her story is featured in a documentary called Social Media Murders, airing on ITV. The documentary examines how social media played a role in connecting the perpetrator and the victim. But let's get on with our video today. At the age of 21, Grace Mullane believed her life was full of exciting possibilities, new experiences, meeting people and traveling. After finishing university in 2018, she decided to take a gap year before starting a job in her field. However, things took a tragic turn on December 1st, just one day before her birthday, when she went on a date, which turned out to be her last. The date was with a man named Jesse Kempson, whom she had met on Tinder. After going out for drinks, Grace never returned, and her friends and family reported her missing. The police investigated and found CCTV footage showing that Grace had gone to Jesse's apartment, but never left. Unfortunately, Jesse had done something terrible. He disposed of Grace's body by putting it in a suitcase and carrying it out of the building. This story is not about the dangers of women traveling alone or meeting strangers on Tinder. Instead, it's about the tragic actions of a disturbed individual who cut short a young woman's life far too early. That's the real danger in this story, the harm caused by this sick person. In Essex, United Kingdom on December 2nd, 1996, Grace Mullane was born, a happy go-getter young woman. She attended Lincoln University and earned a degree in advertising and marketing. Like many other graduates, she chose to take a gap year before starting a job and used the time to travel the world. She was thrilled about exploring new countries, meeting new people, and making the most of this unique adventure. Her backpacking journey began in Peru, where she shared her experiences on social media. After spending 6 weeks in South America and meeting many people, Grace continued her trip to New Zealand, planning to stay there for 2 weeks. On November 30th, 2018, she arrived in Auckland. Since she didn't know anyone in town, she decided to use Tinder to find someone to go out for drinks with. At 5:45 p.m. on December 1st, just a few hours before her 22nd birthday, Grace met Jesse Kempson, a 26-year-old Australian man visiting Auckland. Before meeting him, she sent a picture of the Sky City Christmas tree to her family, which turned out to be the last message they received from her. The interesting aspect of this case is the significant amount of CCTV footage available, allowing us to closely track Grace and Jesse's date. The footage helps create a detailed timeline of Grace's last hours before her tragic fate. After meeting, they went to a burger bar for dinner, and it seems they got along well. They then decided to have some drinks at a Mexican bar. After dinner around 7 p.m., Jesse paid for the drinks and talked to the bartender. They moved on to another bar, which was just a short distance away from his apartment, around 8:30 p.m. At the bar, Grace and Jesse started to feel more at ease with each other, and around 8:50 p.m., the CCTV footage captured them kissing. They continued to flirt and kiss for about an hour, seemingly having a casual and enjoyable date. At one point, Jesse briefly left the table, giving Grace an opportunity to text one of her friends back home. In her text, Grace shared that she was on a date with a guy who worked as a manager for an oil company. She mentioned they were having cocktails, and he planned to celebrate her upcoming birthday by getting drunk, since he was staying at a hotel. She expressed that she felt a strong connection with him and would update her friend about how the night went. They left the bar around 9:40 p.m. and entered the City Life Hotel, where Jesse had rented an apartment. They seemed happy and relaxed, walking close together with Jesse's arm around Grace's shoulder. They were captured on camera exiting the elevator on the 3rd floor just before 10 p.m., which turned out to be Grace's last moments alive. The next morning, December 2nd, Grace's family and friends began trying to reach her to wish her a happy birthday, but there was no response from her. Her silence became worrisome as the hours passed. Throughout her travels, Grace always stayed in touch with her family through texts, Facebook messages, and Instagram. When they didn't hear from her for 2 full days, they became concerned and reported her missing. The police immediately started investigating and looked into Grace's last contacts on the night of December 1st. They checked CCTV footage to trace her movements before she went missing. They discovered that she was last seen heading towards Jesse's apartment, but she never left the building. In contrast, Jesse was seen leaving the building multiple times. After losing track of Grace, the police focused on following Jesse's movements. On the morning of December 2nd, while Grace's family was sending her birthday wishes, Jesse took the elevator downstairs and went to a nearby mall. He seemed to be searching for something specific, a large suitcase. After getting the suitcase, he returned to his apartment and was later observed going to another shop to buy cleaning supplies. He even rented a professional carpet cleaner, acting casually next to another guest in the elevator. Later, Jesse was spotted leaving the apartment building and taking a taxi. CCTV footage showed him at a car rental office where he picked up the keys to a red Corolla and drove it back to the City Life apartments. He then went on another Tinder date, but this one didn't go well. Jesse appeared nervous and gave confusing and contradictory information about himself. He even mentioned the police searching for a body in a specific area and talked about someone he knew who had accidentally killed a woman during rough sex. The date was uncomfortable, and the woman declined his invitation to go somewhere else, trusting her instincts to step away from the situation. After parking the car, Jesse brought large suitcases down in the elevator and used a cart to move them out of his apartment and down to the car park. He loaded the suitcases into the boot of his rented Corolla. He went to sleep and woke up early the next morning and went for a drive. Along the way, he stopped to buy a shovel, and a few hours later, he was seen at a car wash, meticulously cleaning the car he had rented just a few hours before. Later, he was seen discarding other items into a bin on the street before continuing with his day. Grace was reported missing on December 5th, and her father flew to Auckland to search for her. At first, the case was treated as a missing persons situation, with no suspicion of foul play. However, things changed quickly when the police reviewed the CCTV footage. They became focused on Jesse due to his actions, buying cleaning products, using a professional carpet cleaner, and renting a car. The police found it suspicious that Jesse purchased a large suitcase just hours after Grace disappeared and then carried it out on a cart. They began to suspect that he might have used the suitcase to move Grace's body. When the police contacted Jesse, he claimed to know nothing about where Grace went after their date and gave contradictory accounts of his actions that night, raising further doubts and confusion. The police already had their suspicions, and Jesse's initial statement raised even more questions. The CCTV footage told a different and detailed story, leading the police to bring him in for questioning again the next day. During the interrogation, Jesse admitted to killing Grace Mullane. He felt trapped and knew lying wouldn't work. He claimed it was an accident during a sexual encounter that had gone wrong. According to him, Grace had asked him to choke her, and it resulted in her death. Jesse tearfully described how he disposed of the body, cleaned the room, and got rid of the evidence. His confession led the police to the location of Grace's body, in the Waitakere Ranges, a mountain range west of Auckland. Her body was found inside a suitcase, buried in the ground. For the first 2 years of the case, Jesse Kempson's name was not revealed in the New Zealand media due to legal name suppression rules. However, media from other countries chose to publish his name once it was confirmed that he was Grace Mullane's killer. Because of this, his face is often blurred out in the footage. The name suppression has now been lifted, and Jesse Kempson's identity is well known. His trial began in November 2019 after he pleaded not guilty, claiming it was an accident and that he didn't intend to kill Grace. However, the CCTV footage showed his cold and calculated actions, disposing of her body cruelly and trying to cover his tracks afterward. His internet search history played a significant role in the evidence against him. Just minutes after Grace's presumed death, Jesse searched for Hottest Fire and Waitakere Ranges, the place where Grace's body was later found. This suggested that he was already planning how to dispose of her remains. Shortly after Grace's presumed death, Jesse went to a porn website and watched videos. He also searched for the car rental company he would use the next day. Disturbingly, several intimate photographs of Grace's lifeless body were found on his phone. There were 7 photos taken from different angles, indicating that he had manipulated her body to get the shots he wanted. The next morning, while Jesse was shopping for the suitcase and cleaning supplies, he was texting the woman he would go on a date with that evening. Throughout all this, Grace's lifeless body was still in apartment 308. Investigators found a large blood stain on the apartment floor next to the bed, and there were bloody footprints near the stain. The room had been recently cleaned. The autopsy revealed that Grace had bruises on her arms, torso, and neck, indicating she had been held down and choked. Other witnesses who had dated Jesse in the past testified that he was interested in bondage and rough encounters. Furthermore, it was later discovered that Jesse had previous charges for rape, sexual assault, threats, and other violent acts. The defense tried to stick to the story that it was a sexual game gone wrong because Grace had no defensive wounds on her. However, it was revealed that Grace had been drinking heavily throughout the evening and her blood alcohol level was high. This level of intoxication could have made it difficult for her to defend herself or even lose consciousness quickly. Jesse likely knew this, which may have influenced his actions. After a 3-week trial and 5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Jesse Kempson guilty of Grace Malene's murder. He received a life sentence with no chance of parole for at least 17 years. He attempted to appeal his sentence twice, but both appeals were dismissed. Currently, he is serving his sentence at a high-security prison in Auckland. What are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below. Prepare to be gripped by a chilling tale of resilience and unimaginable horror. Meet Lindsay Hawker, a woman whose lifelong pursuit of knowledge led her to Japan, where she sought to make a difference by teaching English. Little did she know that her noble mission would soon descend into a nightmarish ordeal. In this harrowing account, we delve into the story of Lindsay Hawker and the sinister man who would go to extreme lengths, even altering his own face, to elude capture. On March 24, 2007, something unsettling happened in Chiba, Japan. Lindsay Hawker, a 23-year-old woman from Coventry, England, disappeared without a trace. What followed was a 3-year-long search by the police. Lindsay was a beloved member of her community. She excelled in her studies and graduated with top honors in biology from the University of Leeds in 2006. Seeking some time off before pursuing her master's degree, she decided to travel. In October of the same year, she joined the Nova Teaching School and embarked on a journey to Japan, a beautiful country. Upon arriving in Japan, Lindsay was assigned to Koiwa, a district in Edogawa, Tokyo. To save on rent, she chose to live in Chiba, a city slightly further east, sharing an apartment with 2 fellow Nova school teachers who soon became her friends. Despite the distance, Lindsay stayed connected with her family and boyfriend in England through various means like Facebook, WhatsApp, Skype, texts, and calls. She relished her time in Japan, and everything appeared to be going smoothly. 6 months into her stay in Japan, in March 2007, Lindsay had a strange encounter. After finishing work, she went to Chiba Station where she usually kept her bicycle. While unlocking her bike, a man approached her from behind and said, "You are my English teacher." Lindsay found this odd because she was certain he wasn't one of her students. Politely, she ended the conversation and hopped on her bicycle to ride back to her apartment. To her surprise, the man started following her. When she increased her speed, he ran after her. While trying to escape, he bombarded her with questions like, "Where are you from?" and "Where did you study?" Lindsay couldn't shake off the man, and eventually she stopped her bike outside her apartment. Once again, he approached her. He asked if she could give him English lessons because he felt he needed help with the language. He suggested meeting at a public cafe where she would feel comfortable, and he promised to pay generously per hour. Lindsay declined his offer, explaining that she was too busy with work and barely had any free time. The man seemed disappointed, but accepted her answer. Then he asked if she could give him a glass of water because he was thirsty from chasing her. Reluctantly, Lindsay agreed and let him into her apartment. She wanted her housemates to see his face in case they encountered him again, and she also wanted to show that she wasn't living alone, hoping it would deter the man if he had any harmful intentions. Once inside the apartment, the man persisted in asking Lindsay for English lessons, but this time he offered to pay her 3,500 yen per hour. Tempted by the easy money, Lindsay reluctantly agreed, and they scheduled a meeting at a coffee shop a few days later. The man seemed grateful for her acceptance. Before leaving, he grabbed a pen and a scrap of paper and hastily scribbled something. To Lindsay's surprise, he handed her a note with a drawing of herself and his name and phone number. The note read, "Tatsuya Ichihashi, phone 047-356-7238. Tatsuya, a 28-year-old man originally from Ichikawa but living in Chiba, had ambitions to become a medical doctor like his father. However, when he was denied further education opportunities, he settled for a degree in horticulture from the University of Chiba in 2005. After graduating, he didn't make any effort to find a job and instead relied on a monthly allowance of 100,000 yen from his parents. While Tatsuya had no previous criminal record, he was once suspected of theft and assault. Allegedly, he had attacked a woman during a robbery, but his father paid her 1 million yen to resolve the matter outside of court. Tatsuya was often described as a loner with a strong interest in physical fitness. He regularly visited his local gym and cycled more than 25 kilometers every day. On Saturday, March 24, 2007, Lindsay and Tatsuya had their first English lesson at a nearby coffee shop. CCTV footage captured them conversing in the queue while ordering their drinks. Lindsay didn't appear visibly uncomfortable, but she made sure to maintain some distance between them. If Tatsuya got too close, she would step away. The lesson lasted a little over an hour, and nothing appeared unusual during that time. After the English lesson, Tatsuya told Lindsay that he had forgotten to bring the payment and invited her to his apartment, which was just half a mile away, to collect it. Lindsay agreed, and they took a taxi together. Arriving at Tatsuya's home, Lindsay asked the driver if he could wait since she needed to go to work that afternoon. The driver agreed, and both Lindsay and Tatsuya entered the building. However, as minutes passed by without Lindsay returning, the driver assumed she had changed her plans and left. Lindsay didn't show up for work that afternoon, and her roommates grew worried when she still hadn't returned home after several hours. They decided to contact the police and report her missing, but unfortunately the police didn't take it seriously at first. When Lindsay failed to check in at work on Monday, the Nova Teaching School contacted her parents in England to inform them. Alarmed by the situation, Lindsay's parents called the police again. During the investigation at her apartment, her roommate shared the information about the strange man she had a lesson with and handed over the sketch with his details. On Monday, March 26th at 5:40 p.m., 2 police officers were sent to Tatsuya's apartment. They knocked on the door, but no one answered. However, the kind neighbors allowed the officers to access their balcony to peek into Tatsuya's living room. The lights were off, but they could see someone inside. They also noticed that Tatsuya had moved his detachable bathtub from the bathroom to the balcony, which seemed suspicious. The officers suspected that Lindsay might be held captive in Tatsuya's apartment and called for backup. After 3 hours, 9 officers had gathered, and they began planning a raid on the apartment. However, as they were preparing to storm in, Tatsuya unexpectedly opened the door barefoot, carrying a backpack. Seizing the opportunity, he swiftly passed through the 9 officers. They managed to grab his backpack, but unfortunately, Tatsuya escaped into the darkness of the night. During the search of Tatsuya's apartment, the police made a horrifying discovery. Lindsay Hawker's lifeless body was found naked in the bathtub on the balcony. Tatsuya had covered her completely with a mixture of soil and sand, leaving only her right hand visible. Upon further investigation, they found that Tatsuya had added a substance to the soil to accelerate decomposition, and he had placed flower seeds on top to disguise it as a flower bed. He had also shaved Lindsay's hair off. Among the items found in the apartment were multiple women's wigs, indicating that Tatsuya may have been a cross-dresser. Speculation arose, suggesting he might have killed Lindsay to use her hair for a wig, but this theory was never confirmed. By the following morning, Tatsuya had become a wanted man throughout Japan. The police distributed wanted posters and aired his image on various news outlets multiple times a day, hoping for leads. However, despite these efforts, no significant breakthroughs occurred. After a couple of weeks with no solid leads, the police resorted to releasing photoshopped images of Tatsuya wearing wigs in case he was disguising himself in drag. Unfortunately, these attempts also proved fruitless, and the investigation went cold. 2 months after Lindsay's tragic death, her parents arrived in Japan to help raise awareness and put pressure on the authorities to find Tatsuya. Frustrated with the progress of the police investigation, Lindsay's father went as far as befriending members of the Yakuza, the Japanese mafia, and offering them bottles of whiskey in exchange for their assistance in locating his daughter's killer. The media turned their focus on the Japanese police and began questioning their competence. How could 9 officers fail to apprehend a single man when they were about to raid his home? Why did it take them a month to question crucial witnesses? Furthermore, the revelation that the wanted picture of Tatsuya was 7 years outdated only added to the public scrutiny. The situation escalated into public arguments between the police and Lindsay Hawker's family, prompting extensive coverage from both British and Japanese media. Meanwhile, Tatsuya managed to travel across the country, moving from Aomori in the north to Okinawa, the southernmost island. In the years 2008 to 2009, Tatsuya resided in Osaka, around 250 miles west of Tokyo. He survived by sleeping in internet cafes and working on construction sites, saving up money for plastic surgery to alter his appearance. However, even before undergoing surgery, he had already mutilated his face through self-inflicted injuries. He used a knife to remove moles, cut off part of his lower lip with scissors, and even sewed a thread through his nose to change its shape. As desperation grew, the police raised the cash reward from 1 million yen to 10 million yen and released more photoshopped images suggesting that Tatsuya had likely undergone plastic surgery. In October 2009, a plastic surgeon informed the police that he believed he had recently operated on Tatsuya. The surgeon provided a before and after photo, which was promptly released to the public. The plan to alter Tatsuya's appearance through plastic surgery worked, and he managed to evade capture for a while. However, his luck ran out when a colleague on the construction site where he was working recognized him and alerted the police. In a state of panic, Tatsuya hatched a plan to escape to Okinawa and find refuge in an abandoned bunker on a remote island, a tactic he had used before when he felt the police were getting too close. On November 10, 2009, Tatsuya attempted to make his escape from Osaka's ferry port, hoping to remain unnoticed during the 3-day ferry journey. Unfortunately for him, a staff member at the port recognized him and immediately alerted security, who called the police. When questioned, Tatsuya knew he couldn't deny his identity any longer and admitted, "Yes, it is me, Tatsuya Ichihashi." He was promptly arrested on the spot. Initially charged with abandoning a body, he later faced additional charges of rape and murder. On July 4, 2011, Tatsuya Ichihashi's trial commenced. Given the nature of the crime, the deliberation was brief and he confessed to luring Lindsay into his home, raping her and strangling her out of fear that her screams would alert the neighbors. The media focused on speculation about how the court would punish him, as Japan still practiced the death penalty. However, on July 21, 2009, Tatsuya received a sentence of life imprisonment with a minimum of 10 years before being eligible for parole. Although many campaigned for him to receive the death penalty, it was not imposed in his case. In 2012, Tatsuya appealed his sentence, arguing that it was too harsh and claiming that Lindsay's death was accidental, as he was trying to silence her screams. However, the Tokyo High Court upheld the original sentence. Tatsuya continued to inflict pain on the Hawker family by writing a book about his time on the run from his prison cell. The book gained popularity in Britain, selling over 100,000 copies. He offered Lindsay's parents the royalties, but they declined. The book's success led to its adaptation into a film called I Am Ichihashi, The Journal of a Killer. As of 2022, Tatsuya remains imprisoned, serving his sentence.
The peaceful and content life of a devout Christian family of 5 took an unforeseen turn one fateful night. In this remarkable tale, we'll delve into the extraordinary story of Amanda and Billy Cope and the profound impact it had on their family. Prepare to embark on a journey marked by a grievous miscarriage of justice, replete with unexpected plot twists and intricate complexities. Let's begin. It was November 29th, 2001, in Rock Hill, South Carolina, when 37-year-old Billy Cope discovered the lifeless body of his daughter, Amanda, in her bedroom during the early hours of the morning. At around 3 a.m., Billy abruptly woke up, sensing that something was amiss within his household. Notably, the hallway light was illuminated, despite his recollection of having turned it off before retiring to bed. His wife, Mary Sue, was away at her overnight job, leaving Billy alone with their 3 daughters, Amanda, aged 12, Jessica, aged 11, and Kyla, aged 7. Being a devoutly Christian family, they had foregone their usual Wednesday church service that night to assist Jessica with her math homework. Amanda, the caring older sister, had offered her help, and Billy consented to allow the girls to stay up until their task was complete. The youngest daughter, Kyla, had retired to bed at 9 p.m., while Billy stayed up with the 2 older girls until 1 a.m., assisting them with their schoolwork. Subsequently, everyone retired to bed, with Billy utilizing a CPAP breathing machine to manage his sleep apnea. Strangely, just 2 hours later, Billy was startled awake. In a drowsy state, he proceeded to check on his daughters. Finding Amanda's door closed, he speculated that she might have been the one to switch on the hallway light, possibly having risen for a drink of water. The door to the other bedroom was open, revealing a peaceful slumber of his 2 younger daughters. Feeling somewhat reassured, Billy returned to his bed, reattached his breathing machine, and promptly fell back asleep. The following morning, at 6 a.m., he was rudely awakened by the blaring of his alarm clock. He later mentioned that during the intermittent moments of sleep, he had dreamt about the rapture. In his dream, Jesus had come to gather his followers, and he witnessed Amanda being taken, while he was left behind, bidding her farewell with the words, "Bye, Daddy." Still shaken from the intensity of his dream, Billy hastened to check on his daughters. The sight of his younger girls still peacefully asleep in their beds initially brought him relief, but it was short-lived. When he attempted to open Amanda's door, it became entangled with the closet door. requiring force to gain entry. In that harrowing moment, he was confronted with an unbearable scene: Amanda's lifeless body lying motionless on her bed. As he reached out to touch her, he felt the chilling coldness, confirming his worst nightmare. In a state of shock, he covered her lifeless form and, overwhelmed with grief, dialed 911.
Is she breathing?
Oh, no, she's dead.
She's
She's cold as a cucumber. And
okay, you don't want to try to CPR or anything on her?
no, ma'am, she's dead. I mean, her mouth is completely shut. She's ice cold.
In his initial statement to the police, Billy Cope recounted that he woke up around 6 a.m., called out his daughter's name, and upon receiving no response, decided to check on her. It was during this check that he tragically discovered his daughter's lifeless body on the floor of her own bedroom and promptly called 911 for assistance. Based on the absence of signs of forced entry and what they perceived as a lack of emotional display, the police considered Cope a suspect. He underwent 2 interviews before being released, only to be brought in for a 3rd session later that same night, which extended into the following morning and ultimately resulted in Cope's imprisonment. Throughout more than 24 hours of persistent interrogation, Cope maintained his innocence, despite voluntarily waiving his Miranda rights and offering to undergo a polygraph test on 5 separate occasions. Following an overnight stay in jail, he was subjected to a polygraph examination the next morning, which he successfully passed. However, the officers informed him that he had failed the polygraph, leading to the continuation of the interrogation. Astonished, devastated, and bewildered by the results, Cope questioned aloud whether it was possible to commit such a horrific crime and have no recollection of it, a notion that the interrogator had previously suggested. Overwhelmed, Cope broke down and confessed to the crime, stating, "I must have done it." He proceeded to provide a detailed account of how he molested and strangled his daughter. This initial confession was sealed. 2 days later, Cope provided the police with a second written confession in which his story had changed. He now claimed that he had raped and killed his daughter while dreaming about an ex-girlfriend who had undergone an abortion. In compliance with the police, Cope returned to the house to reenact the events of that tragic night. Subsequently, the police drafted a comprehensive, detailed narrative of the murder, which Cope signed, constituting his 3rd confession. However, the evidence did not align with Cope's confessions. Dr. Maynard, the physician who performed Amanda's autopsy, disclosed the presence of bite marks on the child's right breast, and semen was found in her pants, indicating evidence of sexual assault. Both samples were tested and did not match Cope. Instead, they matched James Sanders, a sex offender residing across the street who had previously committed similar crimes. Yet, within days of receiving the results, the police falsely informed Cope's wife that the semen matched her husband's perfectly. Desperate to extract another confession, the police went through extreme lengths, even wiring Cope's wife and sending her to jail. Nonetheless, Cope did not confess. Tragically, Cope's wife passed away during surgery, unaware of the deception that had torn their world apart. Despite a detailed confession lacking supporting evidence, the prosecutor accused Cope of conspiracy, alleging that he had exploited his daughter by involving Sanders. This accusation primarily relied on Cope's confession and the absence of signs of forced entry. During the trial, the prosecutors relied on a female friend of Cope's late wife as their primary source of evidence. She claimed to have received 2 handwritten notes from Cope confessing to the crime. However, Cope denied writing these notes, and it was determined that he did not have access to the materials used or match the handwriting attributed to him. Additionally, the credibility of the witness was questionable, as she had previously faced forgery charges, rendering this evidence inadmissible. To support his defense, Cope presented expert testimony from Dr. Sal Kassan, who discussed false confessions. Dr. Casson argued that the interrogation techniques employed by the police were unethical and should be dismissed. Specifically, 5 inappropriate tactics were highlighted. False evidence. Officers falsely informed Cope that he had failed the polygraph despite him actually passing the test. Positive confrontation. Offers asserted their belief that Cope was guilty. Refusal to accept denial. Despite Cope's cooperation with the polygraph and waiver of an attorney, the officers disregarded his denial of guilt. Minimization. Officers suggested that the crime may have been accidental. Interrogation under duress. Cope was questioned while traumatized and fatigued. Dr. Casson referenced similar cases of false confessions, such as those of Peter Riley and Gary Gager, who confessed to crimes they did not commit after being falsely led to believe they were guilty due to polygraph results. However, the court ruled that these cases were irrelevant to the present trial and deemed the testimony inadmissible. Although Sanders had a history of committing rapes and killings in a manner similar to the victim in this case, the court refused to admit evidence of his previous crimes, as evidence of other crimes is typically not admissible to determine the defendant's character. The testimony of James Hilly, a convicted burglar, claimed to recognize Sanders' distinct voice from overhearing him in prison, bragging about getting away with raping and killing a young girl in the Rock Hill area. However, this testimony was deemed irrelevant since it did not provide specific details about the time or location of the alleged confession. In the end, prosecutors asserted that Cope knowingly permitted James Sanders, his neighbor, to enter his home with the intention of attacking his daughter. They further claimed that Cope himself had previously assaulted the girl. Consequently, both Cope and Sanders were convicted of murder and handed life sentences without the possibility of parole. Cope's defense attorneys contended that the prosecution had manipulated the evidence to wrongfully imprison an innocent man. They argued that Cope, who suffered from mental issues, was so emotionally devastated by his daughter's death that the investigators were able to exploit him into confessing to a crime he did not commit. However, the state Supreme Court upheld Cope's conviction in 2013, and the case was subsequently declined by the U.S. Supreme Court. Cope's defense attorney expressed their profound disappointment in their inability to secure his release from prison, considering him a married father of 3. In a statement shared on the Facebook page, Free Billy Wayne Cope, they wrote, "Billy's death marks a sad end to a horrible miscarriage of justice." Prosecutors maintained that the Cope residence in Rock Hill was securely locked when 12-year-old Amanda was discovered strangled to death, suggesting that someone must have granted Sanders access. In response, the defense attorneys argued that the lock on the home's door could easily be manipulated with a credit card or driver's license. In a statement to the Daily News, Cope's defense team expressed their deep disappointment at their inability to save him from this tragic fate, considering it one of the most profound letdowns of their lives and careers. Cope passed away in prison at the age of 53 in 2017 due to natural causes, steadfastly maintaining his innocence until the end. The core issue in Cope's trial is not whether an innocent man was wrongly convicted, although there is a strong possibility of his innocence based on available evidence. The undeniable victim in this case is Amanda Cope. The main problem lies in the coercive interrogation tactics employed by the police officers, which ultimately resulted in Cope's confession. These techniques, while deceitful and inappropriate, are legally permissible. Despite their ethical concerns, they do not violate the law. Consequently, Cope's confession could not be dismissed, since these techniques are not illegal. Coupled with the circumstantial evidence presented, his confession alone was sufficient for a conviction of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Before concluding, please consider liking this video if you found it enjoyable, and subscribe to our channel for future content. We also encourage you to share your thoughts on whether you believe Billy was innocent or not in the comments section down below.
Tonight, a family wants answers after the death of this 41-year-old man. Police say he was found shot in his car in the middle of the day along Anderson Street in Orlando.
This is a heartbreaking story about a shooting that took the life of a man named Eloy Lebron. The police conducted interviews with 2 witnesses, hoping to gather information that would help them solve the case. Unbeknownst to the investigators, they were actually interviewing the individuals responsible for the crime. One of the women, who couldn't control her words, ended up revealing crucial details that ultimately led to their arrest. It was a Thursday evening on July 23, 2020, in Orlando, Florida. The Lebron family received an unexpected knock at their door, only to discover the tragic news. When the police arrived at the scene, they found Eloy Lebron, their son, dead in his car. Earlier that day, Eloy and his friend were driving on West Anderson Street and Jernigan Avenue around 12:30 p.m. Suddenly, a car sped past them and shots were fired from the vehicle. Eloy's friend managed to duck down and avoid getting hurt, but Eloy, who was driving, was struck by the gunfire. The police immediately launched an investigation, starting with interviews of eyewitnesses at the scene. They began by speaking to Eloy's friend, who revealed that the incident happened unexpectedly, catching them off guard. In a matter of moments, their peaceful drive down the street took a terrifying turn. A car pulled up alongside them, and a barrage of bullets rained down. According to Eloy's friend, the shots originated from a 2004 Saturn Ion. As the police spoke to more witnesses, their accounts confirmed that the Saturn was indeed the source of the gunfire. Some witnesses mentioned seeing 2 young girls with guns, while others noted a girl and a boy, with only the boy holding a firearm. Fortunately, a security camera positioned on a nearby street captured the entire incident. The footage revealed that the Saturn was initially driving in the opposite direction of Eloy's car, a Toyota Tacoma. Suddenly, the Saturn executed a sharp U-turn, aggressively following Eloy. The Saturn then accelerated and changed lanes to overtake Eloy's car, unleashing a barrage of gunshots in the process. The video footage also captured the license plate number of the car involved and the person driving it. It turned out to be a woman wearing a white tank top. The following day, law enforcement pulled over a 2004 Saturn Ion with matching plates. Inside the vehicle were a woman, her daughter, and another family member. All 3 women were taken in for questioning. One of the individuals taken in for questioning was 19-year-old Markia Angelia Hamilton. Markia worked at Sonny's, a barbecue restaurant in Orlando, and had an interest in joining the military. When brought into the interrogation room, Markia appeared surprised when told she was being investigated for a murder. She denied any involvement, asking what she had to do with it. During the interrogation, Markia was questioned by 2 detectives, Detective Overfield, who was leading the case, and Detective Spragg, who was assisting him. They apologized for the wait and began gathering preliminary information about Markia. We learned that Markia has a boyfriend named Brandon, and she also has a suspended driver's license. The detectives then swear her in, and the atmosphere in the room noticeably changes. Detective Overfield gets straight to the point and asks Markia about her recent work schedule. She initially says she worked on Wednesday, the day before the incident, from 4 to 9 p.m. However, when questioned about the day of the shooting, Markia corrects herself, stating that she actually worked on Thursday from 4 to 9 p.m. and had Wednesday off. This discrepancy raises suspicion, as it seems odd to forget the day before such a significant event. Markia further explains that she woke up at her boyfriend's house around 12 p.m. on the day in question. Her cousin Sharia, who usually drives her mother's Saturn, picked her up. Markia clarifies that Sharia drives the car more often than she does, as her boyfriend has a car and usually provides transportation for her. Markia gets picked up by her cousin Sharia, and since she needs to be at work by 4 p.m., they decide to kill some time by smoking before her shift. They drive to Molly World, a place located on Jernigan Avenue and West Anderson Street. However, things become a bit unclear from this point. According to Markia, when they arrived in the neighborhood, they noticed a man running down the sidewalk. This caught their attention, and moments later they heard gunshots. They quickly left the area, nearly crashing into a white truck and even driving the wrong way down a one-way street, before eventually reaching Markia's residence a few blocks away. Strangely, she didn't mention where the gunshots came from initially. Markia then proceeds to describe the events that followed. She went to her house, washed her work clothes, smoked at the park, and eventually made her way to work. After work, Jeria picked up Markia and took her to Brandon's house, where they smoked again before returning home. Markia's alibi for Thursday, July 23, 2020, continued to change multiple times during the investigators' questioning. At one point, she claimed that she was actually picked up from work by Jeria's sister, not Jeria herself. She explained that Jeria's sister had gone to the hospital and discovered she was pregnant. This detail seemed significant and difficult to forget. Later, Markia mentioned that she didn't go to her boyfriend's house and instead went straight home with Jeria's sister. The detective speculated that Markia and Jeria may have been passengers in the car, trying to protect the men involved in the shooting. The investigators explored the possibility that someone other than Markia and Jeria were responsible for the crime, but Markia provided limited information. She mentioned names of men she knew, including her own brother and a man named Scotty, who was involved with Jeria and believed to be the father of her child. Detective Sprague asked if Maria or Jeria had been involved in any revenge or conflicts with the men mentioned earlier. Markia denied any involvement and claimed she had nothing to do with their affairs. However, the detective persisted, mentioning that multiple witnesses had seen gunshots coming from their car. It later became clear that the detectives purposely focused on eyewitness reports and not the video evidence that clearly showed Markia and Jeria at the scene with gunshots originating from their car. This tactic was intended to challenge Markia's defense, suggesting that she was lying. Ultimately, when the jury saw the undeniable video footage, it would expose any false stories Markia had concocted and further implicate her in Eloy's murder. Markia continued to deny her involvement multiple times. Detective Sprague informed Markia that multiple witnesses had claimed the shots came from her car, but Markia continued to deny it. She remained strangely calm throughout the interrogation, even when told that someone's life had been taken as a result. Most of the interrogation focused on logistical details such as the streets Markia was on and her destination. However, Markia was uncooperative, claiming she couldn't remember or wasn't paying attention. In the end, with no confession obtained, the detectives concluded the interrogation and took Markia to the shooting scene to verify her whereabouts. Despite being held for nearly 2 hours, Markia still refused to admit her involvement. Later, the investigators managed to locate Jeria and brought her in for questioning. Jeria, also 19 years old and a co-worker at Sonny's, had a boyfriend named Scotty and was confirmed to be pregnant, as mentioned in Markia's earlier testimony. We discovered that Jeria had previously lived in London, England, and faced difficulties transferring her academic credits upon moving to the United States. Consequently, she never completed high school. Furthermore, despite being the driver on the day of the shooting, she technically did not possess a valid driver's license, only holding a learner's permit. Not an ideal situation. During the interrogation, after being sworn in, the detectives informed Jeria that they had already spoken to Markia. They claimed that Markia had made certain statements during their drive to the scene, inadvertently indicating their guilt. Allegedly, Markia admitted that the man they saw running was actually running away from them and had fired back at them with his own gun. When confronted with this accusation, Jeria dismissed it, responding that she never said such a thing. She insisted on sharing her own account describing how she received a call from Markia while she was at McDonald's and brought food for herself. After picking up her cousin, Jaria, she went to buy groceries, heard gunshots, and left the area. They then proceeded to wash Markia's work clothes before taking her to work. Many details in Jaria's story aligned with Markia's original account, suggesting that they may have coordinated their stories after Markia's release. However, their false alibis were futile, as the detectives already possessed sufficient evidence linking both of them to the crime. Jaria's questioning aimed to uncover the motive behind the shooting. Detective Braggs directly asked if she was a cold-blooded killer, to which Jaria vehemently denied. The detective then explored various scenarios, seeking a potential explanation that would not brand them as ruthless murderers. There were moments when Jaria pleaded and begged the detectives to reveal the truth. Detective Spragg believed that there must have been a motive behind the girl's decision to shoot someone, while Detective Overfield was ready to apprehend them without further consideration. Detective Spragg hoped that if the girls acknowledged extenuating circumstances, they could negotiate a better outcome in court. However, if they remained silent, the police would interpret it as an act of recklessness, potentially resulting in a life sentence, particularly considering Jaria's pregnancy. Detective Spragg made a heartfelt plea for Jaria to confess and share the complete story, but Jaria chose to stay silent. The detectives expressed their shock and horror as neither Markia nor Jaria confessed to their crimes, showed any remorse for Eloy's murder, or mentioned his name. A few months later, on September 15, 2020, a 10-page arrest warrant was filed for Markia by Detective Spragg. Detective Spragg still entertained the possibility that the girls were lying to protect someone else, likely one of their boyfriends. Investigators confirmed that Markia's boyfriend Brandon had an alibi and was not with them during the incident. However, there were suspicions that Sharia's boyfriend Scotty was present, supporting the theory that the girls were not directly involved in firing any weapons or responsible for Eloy's murder. Rather, they might have been trying to shield Scotty. While they could still be held accountable for lying under oath and being accomplices to a homicide, it was a significant distinction from being responsible for first-degree murder. When asked if Scotty was in the car, Markia maintained that it was only her and Jaria. However, she did mention that earlier that day, before she was picked up, Jaria was driving around with Scotty and another man named Reggie. This detail was not initially disclosed by Jaria during her interrogation. During the interview, Detective Spragg began to consider the possibility that the shooter was seated in the front passenger seat, with Markia sitting behind them in the back seat. This could explain why witnesses claim to have seen men in the vehicle. Although Markia initially dismissed this theory, she made a significant slip-up while discussing her tattoos. She tried to argue that she couldn't be the shooter because her arm tattoos would make her easily identifiable. However, when asked about the timing of getting her tattoos, Markia visibly flinched and made a correction. Despite her attempt to use it as evidence of innocence, her mistake became a crucial piece of evidence.
When did you get those?
I had like this few weeks ago, I think. But, you know what I'm saying?
You didn't have them before.
No, but this right here would identify.
But you didn't have them before.
I had this one before. Yeah.
Not when you stuck that one out the window over the hood of the car. You did not have that.
I did not have this one, no.
Correct. So it wouldn't identify you.
This same whenever was on
what you just did up over the roof of the car like that, shooting, you did not have that tattoo.
Not only had Markia lied about having the tattoo on her arm, which she had obtained only a few weeks ago, but her hand motion while describing the shooting matched the description given by one of the witnesses. This marked the moment when the detectives' 2 months of hard work finally paid off. After Markia demonstrated how she would have fired the gun, it became a crucial piece of evidence for the detectives. They developed a theory that Markia and Jaria intended to send a message to someone on the street, possibly due to a dispute involving one of their boyfriends or themselves. Their initial intention may not have been to kill, but tragically an innocent man lost his life and they were held responsible. The latest update on Markia's case was in March 2021, where she was awaiting a pre-trial hearing. Sources indicate that she has been released on bail. Jaria, on the other hand, was arrested in January 2021 and is also out on bail. As of April 2023, Jaria's case is still ongoing, and a verdict is yet to be reached. This case is far from over, and the motive behind the shooting remains unclear. It is uncertain whether it was a revenge killing or if Eloy had been involved in questionable dealings with their acquaintances. One of the key questions remains: what was the motive behind the shooting? Did Eloy have any connection to Markia or Jaria, or was it a random act of violence? According to Eloy's cousin Williams, there was no known association between Eloy and the girls. He emphasized that Eloy was not just another statistic in the troubling times we live in, but a genuinely good person. Detective Spragg and Overfield were disheartened and frustrated by the cavalier attitudes displayed by Markia and Jaria during their interrogations. It is truly unsettling how heartless these girls appeared, as they never acknowledged their involvement in Eloy's tragic fate. Even now, as the case continues, new evidence could surface, but based on the current footage and their careless behavior during the homicide investigation, Markia and Jaria's future looks grim.
It's a Romeo and Juliet story of teenage romance ending in tragedy. 16-year-old Emma Walker was an honor student and cheerleader on a championship-winning high school squad.
A story of young high school love, ending in heartbreak and murder, with a little bit of suicide attempts in between. This is the tragic story of Emma Walker, whose life was taken all too soon from her. Join us as we uncover the shocking and tragic story in this video. On Friday nights in the fall at Central High School in Knoxville, Tennessee, the football stadium lights up and two teams battle on the field while fans dressed in red and black cheer for their home team, the Bobcats. Every Friday, the whole school is excited to see how we perform. It's the center of our school life, said Seth Armstrong, a recent graduate and former team player. It's really thrilling. At the forefront of the crowd, the marching band and cheerleaders keep the energy up. Back in 2014, a new member joined the cheerleading squad, Emma Walker, a spirited 14-year-old freshman. Emma was really dedicated to cheerleading, said Lauren Hutton, a senior who became good friends with Emma. She truly enjoyed it. It was something she was passionate about. She loved leading and being part of the excitement during football games. During that early autumn, Emma Walker's cheerleading performances on the sidelines caught the attention of an older student known as Number 8, Riley Gall, who was a junior and a wide receiver for Central High. Riley Gall was raised by his mother and grandparents, and he was a good student who also enjoyed playing video games. His friends saw him as someone who liked to make jokes, and he didn't fit the typical jock stereotype. He had a bit of a nerdy side, said Zach Green, one of Emma's friends. He was a bit reserved. If you looked from the outside, you'd think he was just a regular guy. When Emma's parents first met Riley Gall, they had a positive impression of him. He seemed like a nice young man, like the boy next door, Emma's mother, Jill Walker, said. He was polite and friendly when we first met him. He was easy to like. Mark Walker, Emma Walker's father, thought Riley Gall was a good-looking and polite young man. He allowed them to spend time together with supervision, often at their house or meeting up after football games for meals and such. Emma Walker's friends noticed her initial happiness with Gall. Her social media posts started showing many pictures of them paddleboarding, hugging, and taking playful selfies. In one of her posts, Emma wrote, "Look how lucky I am." At the start, their relationship seemed pretty normal, as observed by Keegan Lyle, one of Emma's close friends. "Gall didn't talk to us, her friends, very much," Keegan said. "I just thought, oh, he's just shy." It felt okay, but after a while, we started getting worried. Emma's friends became concerned as they noticed that Gall seemed to want Emma to spend time only with him and not with others. He began controlling her, deciding what she could do and what activities she could be a part of, Keegan explained. He became more possessive and clingy towards her, and he wouldn't allow her to do certain things, added Lauren Hutton. In the following 2 years, Walker and Gall appear to be like that classic high school couple, the type that frequently breaks up and then gets back together. Their friends witnessed very dramatic arguments between them, often occurring through text messages or Snapchat posts. Jill Walker mentioned that Gall always had something to say about her daughter's clothing choices, advising her on what to wear or not. It got to a point where Jill had to talk to Emma about it. Later, according to Lauren Hutton, the relationship between the two became intense. Gall started waiting for Walker outside the supermarket where she worked. He would just wait outside for hours, Hutton explained. Lyle said friends tried to tell Walker that they were concerned about how Gall treated her, but she just sort of ignored it, Lyle said. She did her own thing. According to Walker's friends, Gall's behavior turned aggressive. He sent her hurtful Snapchat messages like, "I hate you, I hate everything about you, and you're the biggest mean person I've ever met." One message in particular worried Walker's mother. Gall wrote, "You're dead to me. I'll check the obituary. You." On one occasion, we saw a message that said, "I'll see your name in the obituary," Jill Walker recalled. We asked him about it, and he said, "I was just really mad." That's when more warning signs started showing. Walker's parents decided to stop Gall from coming to their house and took away their daughter's cell phone in an attempt to prevent them from communicating. However, this didn't work. Riley gave Emma an iPad Touch, and she texted him using the Wi-Fi, explained Seth Armstrong, a friend of Walker's. For every hurtful message Gall sent, there was also a quick apology. One message from Gall said, "Emma, I'm sorry for how I act." Another message stated, "I love you more than I can express in words." Jill Walker, along with her husband, had advised their daughter to break up with Gall multiple times. However, they found that as they clashed with their teenager about it, Emma began to side more with Gall. He had a way of making her feel like he was the only one who understood her. By the time fall of 2016 rolled around, Emma Walker and Gall were still a couple. Gall, who had graduated, was now an 18-year-old freshman at a nearby college. Meanwhile, Emma was in her junior year of high school. Despite her parents' efforts to separate them, their rocky relationship persisted. Around Halloween that same year, Emma's parents decided to ground her. She wasn't allowed to leave the house, except for school and cheerleading practice. They kept a close watch on her movements, and surprisingly, it seemed to have a positive effect. Emma started acting like her old self again, noted her father, Mark Walker. She would come out of her room, have dinner with us, and engage in conversations. Emma even sent a text to her friend Keegan Lyle saying that she and Gall were done for good. She realized that she deserved better, Lyle recalled. "We were all so relieved and excited. We had been waiting for this moment." However, Gall didn't handle the breakup well. In his college dorm room, he ingested a large number of Vicodin pills and combined them with alcohol in a suicide attempt, and even his friends noticed his changing moods. He would be off by himself, seeming down, and saying things like, "I'm so depressed, I want to harm myself." You know, things like that, Gall's friend Alex McCarty recalled. It seemed like he was asking for help in his own way. Then on Friday, November 18th, 2016, Walker got permission to go to a gathering at a friend's house. Around 11:30 p.m. that night, her classmate Zach Green came to the house where they were hanging out. Walker took him aside and shared that she had been getting strange text messages from an unfamiliar number. "Zach, I'm receiving these really weird texts that say, 'Come outside alone if you don't want someone you love to get hurt,'" Green recounted. She showed him her phone to prove it. "Go to your car with your keys," read one text. Then another said, "Go alone." Yet another said, "I have someone you care about. If you don't do as I say, I'll harm them. Green mentioned that Walker believed it might be a prank by one of Gall's friends. She texted back, mentioning the possibility of calling the police. However, the text messages took a darker turn, Green explained. If you want to hear him cry and scream, give him a call, read one message. Green stated that Walker began pleading with him for assistance until she finally told him, "Zach, listen, they said they left Riley outside." He and Walker ventured outside, and indeed they found a body lying face down in a ditch near the house, illuminated by the streetlight. Upon closer inspection, they realized it was Gall. As they approached Gall, he raised his head with a bewildered expression, his demeanor appearing confused. Emma questioned him, asking why he was there, to which he responded incoherently. Gall claimed not to know how he arrived, suggesting he had been kidnapped and dropped off without understanding his surroundings. His actions seemed odd, holding his head as if he had been hit. Emma felt uneasy and uncertain about the situation. She conveyed her desire for him to leave, mentioning their recent breakup. Gall seemed disheartened and walked away by himself. He contacted his friend Noah Walton, claiming he had been abducted. However, Walton doubted his story, describing Gall's voice as fatigued or tearful. Gall alleged that he had been attacked, his car taken, and he was placed in a van with no knowledge of his whereabouts. He insisted Walton not involve the police and displayed reluctance toward calling 911. None of Emma's friends reported the supposed kidnapping to the authorities that night. The following morning, Emma returned home and texted her friends about a stranger at her doorstep. She expressed fear, feeling threatened by the individual dressed in black who rang her doorbell persistently. She also reached out to Gall with mixed feelings, expressing both dislike and a need for his presence. Gall responded, offering assistance and hurrying to reach her. When Emma failed to meet her mother as planned that morning, Jill Walker returned home to find Emma and Gall in the front yard. Jill requested Gall's departure, reminding him of his prohibition from the property. Although visibly shaken, Emma suspected the stranger might have been a burglar or a potential stalker. Jill, however, questioned the repeated involvement of Gall in such incidents. Jill expressed her doubts to Emma, suggesting that Gall's actions were an exaggerated attempt to gain her attention. Concerned for her safety, Jill and her family closely monitored Emma's movements, even observing her while she worked. By Sunday night, the situation appeared to have normalized at the Walker residence. Emma engaged in a conversation with her friend Keegan Lyle about a homework assignment before retiring for the night, a little after midnight. Around 6 a.m. on Monday, November 21st, 2016, Jill Walker entered her daughter's room, but couldn't wake her up. Emma Walker's lifeless state became evident, and Jill immediately called 911 for help. Police were dispatched to the Walker residence. Initially considered a possible suicide, the presence of a bullet hole in the wall suggested otherwise. It was a small hole about the size of a pen. Additionally, 2 shell casings were found outside, indicating that 2 shots had been fired from the outside into Emma's bedroom. She had been fatally shot in the head, with 1 bullet hitting behind her left ear and the other lodging in her pillow. Investigations began, and Emma's friends and family were interviewed. The name Riley Gall emerged repeatedly, given his prior relationship with Emma and the way he treated her. Gall expressed his grief on social media, sharing tweets and a lengthy Facebook post mourning Emma. His repetitive declarations of love raised suspicions. Following Emma's death, Gall's friends disclosed a secret he had shared with them regarding his fear for his life. He had shown a stolen gun to a friend out of fear for his safety. Detectives questioned Gall about his whereabouts over the past few days. During the interrogation, Gall referred to Emma as the girl and exhibited an emotionless demeanor. He recounted attempting to contact Emma, but their interactions were strained. Gall's actions and words during the interview seemed calculated and detached. Gall described his feelings of distress after the breakup, spending time at his grandparents' house and later breaking down in his car at college. Despite his account of emotional turmoil, his demeanor remained distant and rehearsed, prompting detectives to be skeptical of his sincerity. Detectives learned that Riley Gall, an acquaintance of Emma's, had shown a gun to his friend Alex McCarty, who later shared this information with the police. Gall's grandfather had reported the gun missing from his car, and detectives inquired about it during their questioning of Gall. During the questioning, Gall denied knowledge of the gun's whereabouts and refuted showing it to McCarty. He also denied asking his friend Noah Walton about removing fingerprints from a gun. Gall became defensive when detectives asked to examine his cell phone and questioned whether he was a suspect. Following Gall's departure from the sheriff's office, he messaged McCarty, expressing concern about McCarty's disclosure of the gun to the police and urging his friends not to cooperate with law enforcement. Walton and McCarty, believing that Gall was withholding the truth, collaborated with the police in a sting operation to retrieve the potential murder weapon. Equipped with microphones, a transmitter, and a concealed video camera, the two teens assisted in recovering evidence, including the gun, gloves, and black clothing. This operation led to Gall's arrest. At his trial, his defense attorney argued that Gall had fired the gun in an attempt to scare Emma and gain her attention, asserting that he never intended to cause harm. Gall was found guilty of first-degree murder, stalking, theft, reckless endangerment, and possession of a firearm during a dangerous felony. He was sentenced to life in prison.
The first defined offense, charging the defendant with first-degree murder. Did the jury reach a verdict?
Yes, we did.
What is your verdict?
Guilty.
Emma's mother, Jill Walker, hopes that her daughter's tragic story can serve as a warning to others about the dangers of controlling and tumultuous relationships. She emphasizes the importance of recognizing signs of emotional and controlling behavior in relationships and encourages kindness towards others. In memory of Emma, her family has worked to honor her legacy by contributing to meaningful causes, such as a dog park and a NICU patient room named after her. They aim to keep Emma's spirit alive by spreading kindness and raising awareness about unhealthy relationships. In a tangled web of mystery and suspicion, a police officer finds himself at the center of a shocking incident.
Police department! Police department!
The evidence paints a haunting picture. A shot to the head, a dubious suicide label. Yet, against all odds, his wife miraculously survives, becoming the beacon of hope for uncovering the truth. But despair grips all who seek justice when she awakens with no memory of the fateful event. As the case threatens to be swept aside, a tenacious quest for answers unfolds, fueled by an unwavering determination to unravel the enigma surrounding this dark and clandestine affair. Georgia, situated in the southeastern region of the United States, known for its rich history, vibrant culture, and stunning landscapes, Georgia offers a unique blend of southern charm, modern cities, and breathtaking natural beauty. With Atlanta as its bustling capital and largest city, Georgia is a state that effortlessly combines urban sophistication with the tranquility of the countryside. But one day in 2016, an incident shook the community of Griffin when the wife of a Griffin police officer miraculously survived a gunshot to the head from his service weapon. The officer in question, Matthew Boynton, faced severe consequences following the incident, but not directly related to the shooting itself.
I love her. She loved me. She told me she loved me before she did it. What am I kids gonna do?
Pushing this down.
Good nervous. God damn it, man.
On July 28, 2017, Boynton found himself arrested for providing false information to his department regarding the possession of a gym bag containing his estranged wife Jessica's personal belongings. Tragically, Jessica was in a coma during this time, and she had packed the bag with the intention of leaving Boynton, planning to take their 2 young children with her. Initially, Boynton denied having any knowledge of the bag's whereabouts. However, it was his then-girlfriend who provided a crucial tip that led to the discovery of the bag. She notified Will Sanders, and he purchased the bag from Boynton's girlfriend and promptly handed it over to the Griffin Police Department. In the face of this evidence, Boynton eventually confessed to his actions. As the investigation unfolded, authorities also examined Sanders' involvement in the matter. Ultimately, Jessica's shooting was deemed a suicide, despite some concerns raised by her doctor at the Atlanta Trauma Center. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation, GBI, cleared Boynton of any involvement in the shooting. However, after Boynton and Jessica finalized their divorce, Jessica filed a complaint against Boynton with the Griffin Police Department, accusing him of refusing to return her belongings. During the course of the investigation, statements were taken from both Boynton and Jessica. Boynton vehemently claimed not to possess any of Jessica's belongings, even signing a statement to that effect. Griffin Police Officer Matthew Boynton was questioned by his own department, including Lieutenant Karen Yancey and Sergeant John Hayes, in an interrogation room. The purpose of the interview was not an internal investigation, but a criminal investigation. Boynton had been arrested for providing a false statement to his department regarding possession of a gym bag that belonged to his now former wife, Jessica. During the interview, Boynton was read his Miranda rights, and Yancey reminded him that anything he said could be used against him in a court of law. Boynton initially claimed that he didn't have any of Jessica's belongings and that everything had been returned to her. However, Yancey presented a photo of the bag in question and asked Boynton if he recognized it. Boynton acknowledged that it was the bag Jessica had allowed him to use for his gym items when they were together. Let's take a look at how everything unfolded during the interview. During the course of the investigation, Matthew was questioned about any belongings of his wife, Jessica, that he might have had in his possession. He brought up a missing Nike bag and suggested that it could potentially be in storage. Interestingly, it was revealed that Matthew himself owned a Nike bag that was typically used for their gym gear. This information raised intrigue and indicated the possibility of further significance. Upon delving deeper, investigators discovered that Matthew's stepfather had placed a bag in storage, but its contents had not been thoroughly examined in recent times. These findings added a new layer of importance to the ongoing investigation, prompting the need for further scrutiny and exploration. The detectives continued their relentless questioning, specifically honing in on the mysterious disappearance of the Nike bag. They suggested the possibility that it may have been inadvertently misplaced during the process of moving. However, doubts persisted regarding whether Matthew possessed more information about the bag's whereabouts than he was willing to divulge. The detectives recognized the potential significance of the bag as a potential source of vital evidence and were resolute in their determination to locate it. Their unwavering focus on finding the bag underscored its potential value in advancing the progress of the investigation. Eventually, it was revealed that Matthew's new girlfriend was in possession of Jessica's Nike bag, shedding light on the reason behind all the inquiries. Overwhelmed by emotions, Matthew was unable to hold back his distress as he contemplated the far-reaching consequences of the investigation on his children and his career. Despite his vulnerable state, the detective remained persistent, relentlessly probing Matthew about his failure to mention the Nike bag earlier. In an attempt to defend himself, Matthew began offering excuses, desperately trying to justify his previous omissions and inconsistencies. The room grew increasingly tense as the weight of the situation, combined with the detectives' unyielding questioning, created a palpable atmosphere of tension and unease. Matthew's deep concern for his career and the welfare of his children became evident as he contemplated his actions and recognized his failure to fulfill his obligations. Or is this just a facade to portray in front of the police? As the interrogation finally came to an end, Matthew was left alone to grapple with his thoughts and emotions. However, his distressing situation took another devastating turn when he received the disheartening news that he had been relieved of his duties as a police officer. This development only added to the weight of his already overwhelming circumstances, leaving him in a state of profound despair. In a perplexing turn of events, Jessica awoke to find herself afflicted with amnesia, unable to recall the details of the shooting incident. Astonishingly, despite evidence to the contrary, the authorities inexplicably classified the shooting as an attempted suicide, abruptly closing the case. This puzzling conclusion left numerous questions unanswered and unresolved, leaving a lingering sense of uncertainty and a need for further investigation into the incident. Following a resilient battle, Jessica emerged from a 3-week coma and is now in a stable condition, showcasing an incredible recovery. However, her memory continues to be impaired, leaving a significant gap in her recollection of the events that unfolded during that period. Despite this setback, Jessica's overall health has improved, and she is gradually regaining her strength while adjusting to her restored well-being. Nevertheless, the path to recovering her lost memories remains challenging and uncertain, posing a daunting journey for Jessica and all those involved in the investigation. The case at hand continues to hold an air of mystery, with indications that a wealth of undisclosed information lies beneath the surface of the current findings. The ongoing investigation has only begun to scratch the veneer, leaving behind a multitude of unanswered questions and intricate complexities that yearn to be unraveled. As the narrative unfolds, it becomes increasingly evident that the true nature of the events involves a web of interconnected layers, still concealed, intensifying the captivating enigma that surrounds this perplexing case. During the questioning conducted by a GBI agent, Matthew Boynton vehemently denied any change of clothing on the night of the incident. However, compelling evidence emerged that directly contradicted his statement. The footage captured by an officer's body camera revealed Matthew wearing a distinctive red jacket at the scene, while surveillance footage from a Walmart later that same night depicted him in entirely different attire. These glaring discrepancies cast a shadow of doubt over Matthew's veracity and potentially implicate him further in the unfolding events. The case surrounding the alleged shooting of Jessica, Matthew's former wife, remains shrouded in mystery, giving rise to a multitude of perplexing questions. Contrary to Matthew's initial report, it has been discovered that Jessica was not shot in the head. Instead, the evidence strongly suggests that she sustained a blow to the head from a blunt object, as there was a conspicuous absence of bullet wounds or gunshot residue on her hands. This startling revelation adds to the intrigue and raises significant concerns about the accuracy of Matthew's account and his potential involvement in the incident. Further investigation has revealed significant inconsistencies between Matthew's reported timeline of events and witness testimony, surveillance footage, and other evidence. Moreover, Matthew's behavior during the investigation, including his falsehoods about changing his clothes and washing his hands, as well as his subsequent theft of Jessica's property and subsequent lies about it, further heightens suspicions about his overall credibility. Despite the presence of glaring discrepancies and compelling evidence to the contrary, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation shockingly closed the case, deeming it a suicide. This decision completely disregarded the crucial information that emerged, including Jessica's survival from the incident with a severe head injury and her subsequent memory loss. The mishandling of the investigation, coupled with the potential for a cover-up, reveals a distressing lack of justice for Jessica. In response to these deeply concerning circumstances, a petition has gained momentum, calling for the involvement of the Federal Bureau of Investigation to assume control of the case. The petition advocates for a thorough and comprehensive examination of all leads and evidence, aiming to ensure that justice is served for Jessica, who has been denied the closure she deserves. Additionally, the petition seeks to protect others from potential harm if Matthew is indeed responsible for the incident. Given the pressing urgency and profound significance of this matter, it is imperative that swift and appropriate action is taken to uncover the truth, rectify the failures of the initial investigation, and provide a fair and equitable resolution for Jessica. The pursuit of justice in this case must not waver until the full truth is revealed and those responsible are held accountable. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more content like this. Also, share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Matthew is guilty or innocent?
In the glow of her prime and on the cusp of a joyous union, a vibrant young court reporter embraced the pinnacle of happiness. But fate had a cruel twist in store, shattering her idyllic existence in a single fateful night.
Well, Sacramento County's oldest cold case has finally been solved. 52 years later, after a county court reporter was murdered, authorities say they know who the suspected killer is.
The enchanting tale of her life morphed into a harrowing nightmare as she fell victim to a savage and senseless crime that would lead investigators searching for nearly half a century. Prepare to delve into the haunting chronicle of Nancy Marie Benelak, a story that will grip your soul as we navigate the depths of tragedy, seeking answers and justice for a life cut tragically short. This story takes us in the 1970s in Sacramento, California, where people lived a peaceful and normal life. But that peaceful life quickly turned into a tragedy for Nancy and her family. Nancy Marie Benelak was born on June 13, 1942, in Nevada, San Bernardino County, California. She grew up in Grass, Nevada with her parents, Brian Addison Benelak and Elaine Laverne Kessler, and had a sister named Linda. Nancy attended Hennessy School and later Nevada Union High School. After graduating, she went to beauty school and worked as a hairstylist in Hawaii for some time. Later, she trained as a court reporter and worked in the Sacramento District Court. Nancy lived alone with her cat in an apartment complex on Arden Way, Bell Street in Sacramento. She had a happy life and was engaged to Ferris Salami, who worked as the chief public defender in the same court. At the age of 28, Nancy's life seemed perfect. She was happily engaged to Salami, and they were planning to get married on November 28, 1970. However, tragedy struck on October 25, 1970. Nancy and Salami went out for dinner after work and returned to Nancy's apartment afterwards. Since Nancy was exhausted, she fell asleep while Salami was still there. It was late at night when Salami decided to leave. He checked the time, which was 11:30 p.m., and followed Nancy's usual practice of leaving the glass door slightly open for her cat. Unfortunately, these two decisions would have dire consequences. The next morning, Nancy's co-workers noticed that she was absent from work, which was unusual because she always gave prior notice if she couldn't make it. Concerned, one of her co-workers called Nancy's son, Jack, to check on her at her apartment. Jack knocked on the door multiple times but received no response. He realized something was wrong and hurried to the building manager to explain the situation. After some discussion, the manager agreed to open Nancy's door. What they discovered inside was a horrifying sight they would never forget. Nancy was lying lifeless in a pool of her own blood. She had suffered multiple stab wounds all over her body, and her head was nearly decapitated. The building manager and Jack immediately called the police, who arrived at the scene shortly after. The question on everyone's mind, including the investigators, was who could have committed such a heinous crime. Nancy's sister Linda, who was already worried about her sister's absence, received a call from her husband, Tom, urging her to come home immediately. Linda sensed something was terribly wrong. Tom broke the devastating news of Nancy's death to her, and also informed Nancy's mother, who was working on Lytton Hill. The police collected some evidence from the crime scene, but it was not sufficient. They reviewed tapes from the area surrounding the crime scene, but realized a thorough investigation was necessary. Detectives found blood all over the crime scene. Mickey Lynx, the lead detective, believed that the assailant used tape to conceal their fingerprints since none were found. Back then, gloves weren't as readily available as they are now. The investigators also discovered a blood trail, indicating that the killer had been injured. The trail led from the balcony on the second floor down to the sidewalk, then to 2 other apartment buildings, and finally ending in the parking lot. This led them to believe that the killer had left the apartment in a vehicle. Further examination of Nancy's body revealed over 30 stab wounds. The investigators determined that she was murdered between 11:30 p.m. when Salami left and in the early hours of October 26, 1970. Despite interviewing more than 500 people, the investigators couldn't find any suspects. Nancy had no known enemies, so this was unexpected. However, one of Nancy's neighbors, Alice Sylvia, reported hearing a scream and footprints around 1:30 a.m. This was believed to be the time of the murder. The crime scene investigation provided some insights. The perpetrator was believed to be a young and agile person who entered Nancy's room by climbing up the second-story balcony through the open glass door. There were signs of a struggle, evident from the wounds on Nancy's arms. The investigators believed that the killer got injured during the altercation, which explained the blood trail. Unfortunately, at that time, there was no advanced DNA technology available. The investigators could only determine the killer's blood group, which wasn't enough to solve the case. The years went by and the case remained unsolved. Nancy's friends and family sought justice, but without technological advancements, there was little progress. 7 months before Nancy's death, another woman named Judith Ann Hikari, a registered nurse, was also murdered in close proximity to Nancy's apartment. The police began connecting the 2 cases due to similarities. Judith, too, was engaged and worked in a professional field. Detectives speculated that both women could have been victims of the infamous Zodiac Killer, a serial killer who operated during the 1960s and 70s. The Zodiac Killer targeted couples in secluded areas near San Francisco and often left behind signs and coded messages to taunt the police. In these correspondences, he threatened to carry out killing sprees and bombings if his messages weren't published. Some of the letters contained secret codes or puzzles where the killer claimed that he was gathering victims as slaves for the afterlife. Out of the 4 codes he created, 2 remained unsolved, and only 1 was cracked in 2020. Although the Zodiac stopped sending written messages around 1974, the unique nature of the case has garnered international attention that has endured over the years. The San Francisco Police Department classified the case as inactive in April 2004, but reopened it before March 2007. The investigation is also ongoing in the city of Vallejo, as well as in Napa and Solano counties. The California Department of Justice has maintained an open file on the Zodiac murders since 1969. However, despite the similarities, there was no concrete evidence linking the Zodiac Killer to Nancy and Judith's cases. To this day, the identity of the Zodiac Killer remains unknown, and Judith Hikari's case remains unsolved. In 2004, after 34 years, a DNA profile was developed from the blood found at the crime scene using new technology. However, when the profile was uploaded to the DNA database, there were no matches with any known offenders. The case went cold once again, and Nancy's family started losing hope. Nearly 5 decades after Nancy's death, in November 2019, detectives from the Sacramento County Sheriff's Cold Case Team and the District Attorney's Office launched a new forensic genetic genealogy investigation. This technology had previously been successful in identifying other criminals, such as the Golden State Killer or the NoCal rapist. The DNA profile developed in 2004 was uploaded to a genealogy website to trace potential relatives of the suspect. It took 3 years of waiting, but finally, with the help of a relative who provided their DNA, the detectives were able to identify the killer after over 50 years. On July 21st, 2022, Nancy's killer was identified as Richard John Davis. He lived in the same apartment complex as Nancy and had planned her murder. Richard John Davis, who was 27 years old at the time of the crime, resided in an apartment opposite Nancy's. He could easily observe Nancy's movements from his own apartment. Detective Mickey Lynx, now retired, revealed in a press conference that Davis had premeditated Nancy's murder. He broke into her apartment through the partially opened glass, covering his fingers with tape, indicating careful planning. The motive behind Davis's actions remains unclear, but detectives speculate that he may have had feelings for Nancy and became enraged when he learned of her upcoming marriage. There were no known disputes or conversations between Davis and Nancy, according to the extensive interviews conducted with 500 people. Davis and his roommate provided strong alibis for each other during the month after Nancy's death. There were no visible wounds on Davis's arms or hands during the investigation. The information regarding Davis's roommate and their current status is not provided. Presenting a false alibi is a serious crime, and it is important to determine if the roommate was questioned about it after it was found out who the murderer was. Davis had no prior convictions except for a charge of driving under the influence, which is why his DNA was not found in the criminal database. He lived freely in Sacramento while Nancy's family and her fiancé mourned her loss, holding on to the hope that her killer would be brought to justice. Unfortunately, Nancy's fiancé, Salami, passed away from leukemia in 2014, never seeing the day the killer was identified. Davis himself passed away on November 2nd, 1997, at the age of 54, due to illness related to alcoholism. If he were alive, he would have been charged with first-degree premeditated murder. Detective Lynx expressed her sadness during the press conference, acknowledging that the legal justice could not be fully served. She hoped that Nancy's sister, Linda, and her husband, Tom, could find some peace in finally knowing the identity of Nancy's killer. Linda, overcome with emotion, listened to the speech in tears. Sacramento County District Attorney Anne Marie Schubert commended the dedicated work of the investigators, emphasizing that justice can sometimes lie dormant for years before being awakened. She expressed gratitude that Nancy was never forgotten and praised the relentless pursuit of truth. Linda Cox, Nancy's sister, expressed her appreciation to the officials for solving the case, admitting that she had almost lost hope of ever finding justice for Nancy. This tragic tale unveils how a life can swiftly fade away when we least anticipate it. Fortunately, in today's era, advanced technologies exist to identify and apprehend perpetrators of heinous crimes. The advent of DNA testing on cold cases has undoubtedly instilled fear in the hearts of countless murderers and rapists, compelling them to run scared, knowing that justice may be closing in. As we reflect upon this narrative, our hearts ache for the young woman who met such a cruel fate. The unimaginable fear and excruciating pain she endured during her final hours are truly harrowing. It is an atrocity beyond comprehension. While this tale evokes profound sadness, it also underscores the importance of our unwavering commitment to the pursuit of justice.
Prepare to be gripped by a chilling tale of resilience and unimaginable horror. Meet Lindsay Hawker, a woman whose lifelong pursuit of knowledge led her to Japan, where she sought to make a difference by teaching English. Little did she know that her noble mission would soon descend into a nightmarish ordeal. In this harrowing account, we delve into the story of Lindsay Hawker and the sinister man who would go to extreme lengths, even altering his own face, to elude capture. On March 24, 2007, something unsettling happened in Chiba, Japan. Lindsay Hawker, a 23-year-old woman from Coventry, England, disappeared without a trace. What followed was a 3-year-long search by the police. Lindsay was a beloved member of her community. She excelled in her studies and graduated with top honours in biology from the University of Leeds in 2006. Seeking some time off before pursuing her master's degree, she decided to travel. In October of the same year, she joined the Nova Teaching School and embarked on a journey to Japan, a beautiful country. Upon arriving in Japan, Lindsay was assigned to Koiwa, a district in Edogawa, Tokyo. To save on rent, she chose to live in Chiba, a city slightly further east, sharing an apartment with 2 fellow Nova school teachers who soon became her friends. Despite the distance, Lindsay stayed connected with her family and boyfriend in England through various means like Facebook, WhatsApp, Skype, texts, and calls. She relished her time in Japan, and everything appeared to be going smoothly. 6 months into her stay in Japan, in March 2007, Lindsay had a strange encounter. After finishing work, she went to Chiba Station where she usually kept her bicycle. While unlocking her bike, a man approached her from behind and said, "You are my English teacher." Lindsay found this odd because she was certain he wasn't one of her students. Politely, she ended the conversation and hopped on her bicycle to ride back to her apartment. To her surprise, the man started following her. When she increased her speed, he ran after her. While trying to escape, he bombarded her with questions like, "Where are you from?" and "Where did you study?" Lindsay couldn't shake off the man, and eventually she stopped her bike outside her apartment. Once again, he approached her. He asked if she could give him English lessons because he felt he needed help with the language. He suggested meeting at a public cafe where she would feel comfortable, and he promised to pay generously per hour. Lindsay declined his offer, explaining that she was too busy with work and barely had any free time. The man seemed disappointed, but accepted her answer. Then he asked if she could give him a glass of water because he was thirsty from chasing her. Reluctantly, Lindsay agreed and let him into her apartment. She wanted her housemates to see his face in case they encountered him again, and she also wanted to show that she wasn't living alone, hoping it would deter the man if he had any harmful intentions. Once inside the apartment, the man persisted in asking Lindsay for English lessons, but this time he offered to pay her 3,500 yen per hour. Tempted by the easy money, Lindsay reluctantly agreed, and they scheduled a meeting at a coffee shop a few days later. The man seemed grateful for her acceptance. Before leaving, he grabbed a pen and a scrap of paper and hastily scribbled something. To Lindsay's surprise, he handed her a note with a drawing of herself and his name and phone number. The note read, "Tatsuya Ichihashi, phone 047-356-7238. Tatsuya, a 28-year-old man originally from Ichikawa but living in Chiba, had ambitions to become a medical doctor like his father. However, when he was denied further education opportunities, he settled for a degree in horticulture from the University of Chiba in 2005. After graduating, he didn't make any effort to find a job and instead relied on a monthly allowance of 100,000 yen from his parents. While Tatsuya had no previous criminal record, he was once suspected of theft and assault. Allegedly, he had attacked a woman during a robbery, but his father paid her 1 million yen to resolve the matter outside of court. Tatsuya was often described as a loner with a strong interest in physical fitness. He regularly visited his local gym and cycled more than 25 kilometers every day. On Saturday, March 24, 2007, Lindsay and Tatsuya had their first English lesson at a nearby coffee shop. CCTV footage captured them conversing in the queue while ordering their drinks. Lindsay didn't appear visibly uncomfortable, but she made sure to maintain some distance between them. If Tatsuya got too close, she would step away. The lesson lasted a little over an hour, and nothing appeared unusual during that time. After the English lesson, Tatsuya told Lindsay that he had forgotten to bring the payment and invited her to his apartment, which was just half a mile away, to collect it. Lindsay agreed, and they took a taxi together. Arriving at Tatsuya's home, Lindsay asked the driver if he could wait since she needed to go to work that afternoon. The driver agreed, and both Lindsay and Tatsuya entered the building. However, as minutes passed by without Lindsay returning, the driver assumed she had changed her plans and left. Lindsay didn't show up for work that afternoon, and her roommates grew worried when she still hadn't returned home after several hours. They decided to contact the police and report her missing, but unfortunately the police didn't take it seriously at first. When Lindsay failed to check in at work on Monday, the Nova Teaching School contacted her parents in England to inform them. Alarmed by the situation, Lindsay's parents called the police again. During the investigation at her apartment, her roommate shared the information about the strange man she had a lesson with and handed over the sketch with his details. On Monday, March 26th at 5:40 p.m., 2 police officers were sent to Tatsuya's apartment. They knocked on the door, but no one answered. However, the kind neighbors allowed the officers to access their balcony to peek into Tatsuya's living room. The lights were off, but they could see someone inside. They also noticed that Tatsuya had moved his detachable bathtub from the bathroom to the balcony, which seemed suspicious. The officers suspected that Lindsay might be held captive in Tatsuya's apartment and called for backup. After 3 hours, 9 officers had gathered, and they began planning a raid on the apartment. However, as they were preparing to storm in, Tatsuya unexpectedly opened the door barefoot, carrying a backpack. Seizing the opportunity, he swiftly passed through the 9 officers. They managed to grab his backpack, but unfortunately, Tatsuya escaped into the darkness of the night. During the search of Tatsuya's apartment, the police made a horrifying discovery. Lindsay Hawker's lifeless body was found naked in the bathtub on the balcony. Tatsuya had covered her completely with a mixture of soil and sand, leaving only her right hand visible. Upon further investigation, they found that Tatsuya had added a substance to the soil to accelerate decomposition, and he had placed flower seeds on top to disguise it as a flower bed. He had also shaved Lindsay's hair off. Among the items found in the apartment were multiple women's wigs, indicating that Tatsuya may have been a cross-dresser. Speculation arose, suggesting he might have killed Lindsay to use her hair for a wig, but this theory was never confirmed. By the following morning, Tatsuya had become a wanted man throughout Japan. The police distributed wanted posters and aired his image on various news outlets multiple times a day, hoping for leads. However, despite these efforts, no significant breakthroughs occurred. After a couple of weeks with no solid leads, the police resorted to releasing photoshopped images of Tatsuya wearing wigs in case he was disguising himself in drag. Unfortunately, these attempts also proved fruitless, and the investigation went cold. 2 months after Lindsay's tragic death, her parents arrived in Japan to help raise awareness and put pressure on the authorities to find Tatsuya. Frustrated with the progress of the police investigation, Lindsay's father went as far as befriending members of the Yakuza, the Japanese mafia, and offering them bottles of whiskey in exchange for their assistance in locating his daughter's killer. The media turned their focus on the Japanese police and began questioning their competence. How could 9 officers fail to apprehend a single man when they were about to raid his home? Why did it take them a month to question crucial witnesses? Furthermore, the revelation that the wanted picture of Tatsuya was 7 years outdated only added to the public scrutiny. The situation escalated into public arguments between the police and Lindsay Hawker's family, prompting extensive coverage from both British and Japanese media. Meanwhile, Tatsuya managed to travel across the country, moving from Aomori in the north to Okinawa, the southernmost island. In the years 2008 to 2009, Tatsuya resided in Osaka, around 250 miles west of Tokyo. He survived by sleeping in internet cafes and working on construction sites, saving up money for plastic surgery to alter his appearance. However, even before undergoing surgery, he had already mutilated his face through self-inflicted injuries. He used a knife to remove moles, cut off part of his lower lip with scissors, and even sewed a thread through his nose to change its shape. As desperation grew, the police raised the cash reward from 1 million yen to 10 million yen and released more photoshopped images suggesting that Tatsuya had likely undergone plastic surgery. In October 2009, a plastic surgeon informed the police that he believed he had recently operated on Tatsuya. The surgeon provided a before and after photo, which was promptly released to the public. The plan to alter Tatsuya's appearance through plastic surgery worked, and he managed to evade capture for a while. However, his luck ran out when a colleague on the construction site where he was working recognized him and alerted the police. In a state of panic, Tatsuya hatched a plan to escape to Okinawa and find refuge in an abandoned bunker on a remote island, a tactic he had used before when he felt the police were getting too close. On November 10, 2009, Tatsuya attempted to make his escape from Osaka's ferry port, hoping to remain unnoticed during the 3-day ferry journey. Unfortunately for him, a staff member at the port recognized him and immediately alerted security, who called the police. When questioned, Tatsuya knew he couldn't deny his identity any longer and admitted, "Yes, it is me, Tatsuya Ichihashi." He was promptly arrested on the spot. Initially charged with abandoning a body, he later faced additional charges of rape and murder. On July 4, 2011, Tatsuya Ichihashi's trial commenced. Given the nature of the crime, the deliberation was brief, and he confessed to luring Lindsay into his home, raping her and strangling her out of fear that her screams would alert the neighbors. The media focused on speculation about how the court would punish him, as Japan still practiced the death penalty. However, on July 21, 2009, Tatsuya received a sentence of life imprisonment with a minimum of 10 years before being eligible for parole. Although many campaigned for him to receive the death penalty, it was not imposed in his case. In 2012, Tatsuya appealed his sentence, arguing that it was too harsh and claiming that Lindsay's death was accidental, as he was trying to silence her screams. However, the Tokyo High Court upheld the original sentence. Tatsuya continued to inflict pain on the Hawker family by writing a book about his time on the run from his prison cell. The book gained popularity in Britain, selling over 100,000 copies. He offered Lindsay's parents the royalties, but they declined. The book's success led to its adaptation into a film called I Am Ichihashi, The Journal of a Killer. As of 2022, Tatsuya remains imprisoned, serving his sentence.
The peaceful and content life of a devout Christian family of 5 took an unforeseen turn one fateful night. In this remarkable tale, we'll delve into the extraordinary story of Amanda and Billy Cope and the profound impact it had on their family. Prepare to embark on a journey marked by a grievous miscarriage of justice, replete with unexpected plot twists and intricate complexities. Let's begin. It was November 29th, 2001, in Rock Hill, South Carolina, when 37-year-old Billy Cope discovered the lifeless body of his daughter, Amanda, in her bedroom during the early hours of the morning. At around 3 a.m., Billy abruptly woke up, sensing that something was amiss within his household. Notably, the hallway light was illuminated, despite his recollection of having turned it off before retiring to bed. His wife, Mary Sue, was away at her overnight job, leaving Billy alone with their 3 daughters, Amanda, aged 12, Jessica, aged 11, and Kyla, aged 7. Being a devoutly Christian family, they had foregone their usual Wednesday church service that night to assist Jessica with her math homework. Amanda, the caring older sister, had offered her help, and Billy consented to allow the girls to stay up until their task was complete. The youngest daughter, Kyla, had retired to bed at 9 p.m., while Billy stayed up with the 2 older girls until 1 a.m., assisting them with their schoolwork. Subsequently, everyone retired to bed, with Billy utilizing a CPAP breathing machine to manage his sleep apnea. Strangely, Just 2 hours later, Billy was startled awake. In a drowsy state, he proceeded to check on his daughters. Finding Amanda's door closed, he speculated that she might have been the one to switch on the hallway light, possibly having risen for a drink of water. The door to the other bedroom was open, revealing a peaceful slumber of his 2 younger daughters. Feeling somewhat reassured, Billy returned to his bed, reattached his breathing machine, and promptly fell back asleep. The following morning, at 6 a.m., he was rudely awakened by the blaring of his alarm clock. He later mentioned that during the intermittent moments of sleep, he had dreamt about the rapture. In his dream, Jesus had come to gather his followers, and he witnessed Amanda being taken, while he was left behind, bidding her farewell with the words, "Bye, Daddy." Still shaken from the intensity of his dream, Billy hastened to check on his daughters. The sight of his younger girls still peacefully asleep in their beds initially brought him relief, but it was short-lived. When he attempted to open Amanda's door, it became entangled with the closet door, requiring force to gain entry. In that harrowing moment, he was confronted with an unbearable scene: Amanda's lifeless body lying motionless on her bed. As he reached out to touch her, he felt the chilling coldness, confirming his worst nightmare. In a state of shock, he covered her lifeless form and, overwhelmed with grief, dialed 911.
Is she breathing?
Oh, no, she's dead.
She's
cold as a cucumber. And
okay, you don't want to try to CPR or anything on her?
no, ma'am, she's dead. I mean, her mouth is completely shut. She's ice cold.
In his initial statement to the police, Billy Cope recounted that he woke up around 6 a.m., called out his daughter's name, and upon receiving no response, decided to check on her. It was during this check that he tragically discovered his daughter's lifeless body on the floor of her own bedroom and promptly called 911 for assistance. Based on the absence of signs of forced entry and what they perceived as a lack of emotional display, the police considered Cope a suspect. He underwent 2 interviews before being released, only to be brought in for a 3rd session later that same night, which extended into the following morning and ultimately resulted in Cope's imprisonment. Throughout more than 24 hours of persistent interrogation, Cope maintained his innocence, despite voluntarily waiving his Miranda rights and offering to undergo a polygraph test on 5 separate occasions. Following an overnight stay in jail, he was subjected to a polygraph examination the next morning, which he successfully passed. However, the officers informed him that he had failed the polygraph, leading to the continuation of the interrogation. Astonished, devastated, and bewildered by the results, Cope questioned aloud whether it was possible to commit such a horrific crime and have no recollection of it, a notion that the interrogator had previously suggested. Overwhelmed, Cope broke down and confessed to the crime, stating, "I must have done it." He proceeded to provide a detailed account of how he molested and strangled his daughter. This initial confession was sealed. 2 days later, Cope provided the police with a second written confession in which his story had changed. He now claimed that he had raped and killed his daughter while dreaming about an ex-girlfriend who had undergone an abortion. In compliance with the police, Cope returned to the house to reenact the events of that tragic night. Subsequently, the police drafted a comprehensive, detailed narrative of the murder, which Cope signed, constituting his 3rd confession. However, the evidence did not align with Cope's confessions. Dr. Maynard, the physician who performed Amanda's autopsy, disclosed the presence of bite marks on the child's right breasts, and semen was found in her pants, indicating evidence of sexual assault. Both samples were tested and did not match Cope. Instead, they matched James Sanders, a sex offender residing across the street who had previously committed similar crimes. Yet, within days of receiving the results, the police falsely informed Cope's wife that the semen matched her husband's perfectly. Desperate to extract another confession, the police went through extreme lengths, even wiring Cope's wife and sending her to jail. Nonetheless, Cope did not confess. Tragically, Cope's wife passed away during surgery, unaware of the deception that had torn their world apart. Despite a detailed confession lacking supporting evidence, the prosecutor accused Cope of conspiracy, alleging that he had exploited his daughter by involving Sanders. This accusation primarily relied on Cope's confession and the absence of signs of forced entry. During the trial, the prosecutors relied on a female friend of Cope's late wife as their primary source of evidence. She claimed to have received 2 handwritten notes from Cope confessing to the crime. However, Cope denied writing these notes, and it was determined that he did not have access to the materials used or match the handwriting attributed to him. Additionally, the credibility of the witness was questionable, as she had previously faced forgery charges, rendering this evidence inadmissible. To support his defense, Cope presented expert testimony from Dr. Sal Kassan, who discussed false confessions. Dr. Kassan argued that the interrogation techniques employed by the police were unethical and should be dismissed. Specifically, 5 inappropriate tactics were highlighted. False evidence. Officers falsely informed Cope that he had failed the polygraph despite him actually passing the test. Positive confrontation. Offers asserted their belief that Cope was guilty. Refusal to accept denial. Despite Cope's cooperation with the polygraph and waiver of an attorney, the officers disregarded his denial of guilt. Minimization. Officers suggested that the crime may have been accidental. Interrogation under duress. Cope was questioned while traumatized and fatigued. Dr. Kassan referenced similar cases of false confessions, such as those of Peter Riley and Gary Gager, who confessed to crimes they did not commit after being falsely led to believe they were guilty due to polygraph results. However, the court ruled that these cases were irrelevant to the present trial and deemed the testimony inadmissible. Although Sanders had a history of committing rapes and killings in a manner similar to the victim in this case, the court refused to admit evidence of his previous crimes, as evidence of other crimes is typically not admissible to determine the defendant's character. The testimony of James Hilly, a convicted burglar, claimed to recognize Sanders' distinct voice from overhearing him in prison, bragging about getting away with raping and killing a young girl in the Rock Hill area. However, this testimony was deemed irrelevant since it did not provide specific details about the time or location of the alleged confession. In the end, prosecutors asserted that Cope knowingly permitted James Sanders, his neighbor, to enter his home with the intention of attacking his daughter. They further claimed that Cope himself had previously assaulted the girl. Consequently, both Cope and Sanders were convicted of murder and handed life sentences without the possibility of parole. Cope's defense attorneys contended that the prosecution had manipulated the evidence to wrongfully imprison an innocent man. They argued that Cope, who suffered from mental issues, was so emotionally devastated by his daughter's death that the investigators were able to exploit him into confessing to a crime he did not commit. However, the state Supreme Court upheld Cope's conviction in 2013, and the case was subsequently declined by the U.S. Supreme Court. Cope's defense attorney expressed their profound disappointment in their inability to secure his release from prison, considering him a married father of 3. In a statement shared on the Facebook page, Free Billy Wayne Cope, they wrote, "Billy's death marks a sad end to a horrible miscarriage of justice." Prosecutors maintained that the Cope residence in Rock Hill was securely locked when 12-year-old Amanda was discovered strangled to death, suggesting that someone must have granted Sanders access. In response, the defense attorneys argued that the lock on the home's door could easily be manipulated with a credit card or driver's license. In a statement to the Daily News, Cope's defense team expressed their deep disappointment at their inability to save him from this tragic fate, considering it one of the most profound letdowns of their lives and careers. Cope passed away in prison at the age of 53 in 2017 due to natural causes, steadfastly maintaining his innocence until the end. The core issue in Cope's trial is not whether an innocent man was wrongly convicted, although there is a strong possibility of his innocence based on available evidence. The undeniable victim in this case is Amanda Cope. The main problem lies in the coercive interrogation tactics employed by the police officers, which ultimately resulted in Cope's confession. These techniques, while deceitful and inappropriate, are legally permissible. Despite their ethical concerns, they do not violate the law. Consequently, Cope's confession could not be dismissed, since these techniques are not illegal. Coupled with the circumstantial evidence presented, his confession alone was sufficient for a conviction of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Before concluding, please consider liking this video if you found it enjoyable, and subscribe to our channel for future content. We also encourage you to share your thoughts on whether you believe Billy was innocent or not in the comment section down below.
This morning, a decades-old murder mystery partially solved.
For 65 years, the story of who would come to be known as America's unknown child has haunted this community.
Vanishing without a trace, countless stories echo of children lost to the abyss. But amidst the haunting tales, one enigma stands in stark contrast. A case that lay dormant for over 6 decades, hiding in a box of anonymity. Known simply as the boy in a box, this perplexing mystery has bewildered generations, leaving no stone unturned in the quest for answers. Yet a glimmer of hope emerges from the depths of the unknown as cutting-edge technology breathes life into his forgotten identity. Prepare to be captivated as we embark on a journey through time, delving into the depths of a chilling enigma that may finally be on the precipice of resolution. This case transports us to the Cold War era in Philadelphia, a city that appeared prosperous on the surface, but held a dark secret. On the evening of February 23, 1957, a student from LaSalle College parked his car near Susquehanna Road and started walking across a vacant lot in the drizzling rain. The young man, whose age was reported differently in various newspapers, had a habit of spying on the residents of a nearby Catholic home for troubled girls. However, on this particular night, his plans took an unexpected turn. As he made his way through the overgrown lot, he stumbled upon a cardboard box. Curiosity got the better of him, and he peered inside, only to find a small dead body tightly squeezed into it. Overwhelmed with fear, he immediately forgot about his original intentions and hurried back to his car. Feeling frightened and ashamed, he decided to confide in his priest the next day, who advised him to contact the police. Following his priest's advice, he called the authorities, but not before making up a story about discovering the box while chasing a rabbit through the tall weeds. The police were notified and dispatched to the lot to investigate. Little did anyone know, this disturbing discovery marked the beginning of a tragic tale that remains unresolved to this day. When the police officers arrived at the empty lot on February 24th, they discovered a large cardboard box lying on its side with one end open. The box had previously contained a baby bassinet from JCPenney. Inside the box was a small boy, his pale body wrapped in a cheap imitation Indian blanket. As they searched the area, they found a man's cap made of royal blue corduroy with a leather strap and buckle on the back, located about 17 feet away from the box. Interestingly, there was a visible path through the weeds and bushes leading from the cap to the cardboard coffin. The boy's body underwent an autopsy conducted by Dr. Joseph Spellman, the chief medical examiner of Philadelphia. According to his report, the boy was estimated to be between 4 and 6 years old. He had blue eyes and light blonde hair that had been unevenly cut, with some areas closely shorn and others almost shaved to the skull. The boy measured 41 inches in height and tragically weighed a mere 30 pounds at the time of his death. Dr. Spellman determined that the cause of death was a brutal beating, evident from the fresh bruises covering the boy's body and face. The examination also revealed older marks, including an L-shaped scar on his chin, a 1-inch surgical scar on the left side of his chest, a round and irregular scar on his left elbow, a well-healed scar near the groin, likely resulting from hernia surgery, and a scar on the left ankle resembling an incision used for accessing veins during a blood transfusion. The medical examiner's report revealed some interesting details about the boy's condition. He had been circumcised, but had no marks indicating that he had received vaccinations, suggesting that he was not enrolled in public school. Additionally, the boy's right palm and the soles of his feet appeared rough and wrinkled, indicating possible exposure to water shortly before or after his death. When subjected to ultraviolet light, his left eye emitted a bright blue fluorescence, indicating recent exposure to a diagnostic dye used in treating chronic eye diseases. Dr. Spellman concluded that the cause of death was head trauma, likely inflicted with a blunt object. However, he couldn't rule out the possibility that pressure had also been applied to the boy's head, possibly during an ill-performed haircut, which may have contributed to his fatal injuries. Detectives dressed the boy and took photographs of his bruised face, hoping to identify him. Unfortunately, as years went by, those hopes gradually faded away. At the start of the investigation, detectives focused their attention on the box that had been used as the boy's makeshift coffin. Originally designed to hold a baby bassinet from J.C. Penney, it was part of a batch of 12 boxes received on November 27, 1956, and sold between December 3, 1956 and February 16, 1957, at a store in Upper Darby, Pennsylvania. Unfortunately, the store had no individual sales records, but investigators eventually managed to locate the other 11 bassinets. Despite their efforts, FBI fingerprint experts could not find any usable prints on the box recovered from the vacant lot. The examination of the blanket proved to be quite frustrating. It was made of inexpensive cotton flannel and had recently been washed and repaired using low-quality cotton thread. The blanket had been cut into 2 uneven pieces and then wrapped around the unclothed boy. Analysis at the Philadelphia Textile Institute revealed that it could have been manufactured in either Swannanoa, North Carolina, or Granby, Quebec. However, these blankets were produced in large quantities, making it difficult for the police to determine where it might have been sold. A label inside the blue cap led the police to Robbins Eagle Hat and Cat Company in Philadelphia. The owner, Hannah Robbins, mentioned that the cap was one of 12 made from corduroy remnants before May 1956. She remembered it because initially it didn't have a leather strap, but a few months later a blonde man in his late 20s returned to have a strap sewn on. Although Hannah recognized the man in the photograph shown to her as the boy in the box, she had no record of his name or address. To aid in identifying the child, the Philadelphia police distributed over 10,000 flyers with his picture to police departments in eastern Pennsylvania and southern New Jersey. The Philadelphia Gas Works included 200,000 flyers with their customers' gas bills, while the Philadelphia Electric Company, grocery stores, insurance agents, and a pharmacists association also circulated around 300,000 flyers. The case was even featured in an article for the FBI's Law Enforcement Bulletin, but unfortunately no substantial leads were generated. There were individuals out there who knew the boy's identity and what had happened to him, but they remained silent. 5 months after the boy was discovered, he was buried in a burial ground in Philadelphia called the Potter's Field, near the Philadelphia State Hospital at Byberry, which was a mental institution. The detectives working on the case managed to collect enough funds to place a headstone in the somber graveyard, bearing the inscription, "Heavenly Father, bless this unknown boy." The case remained dormant and silent for many years, until November 4, 1998, when the boy in the box was exhumed to extract DNA samples for future comparison with potential relatives. However, a year went by, and the authorities revealed their inability to obtain a satisfactory DNA profile from the boy's remains. Another attempt was made in 2000, this time using the boy's teeth, but it also proved unsuccessful. However, a reported successful attempt was made in April 2001. Although the chances of finding living relatives seem quite slim at this stage, some investigators have maintained a hopeful outlook. In 1999, a forensic artist named Frank Bender, who was a founding member of the VDOC Society, came up with a new idea to potentially solve the case. The VDOC Society is an organization in Philadelphia focused on solving crimes. They are named after Eugene Francois Vidocq, a pioneering 19th century French detective who used criminal psychology to solve unsolved homicide cases. During their meetings, which are attended by forensic professionals, current and former FBI profilers, homicide investigators, scientists, psychologists, prosecutors, and coroners, law enforcement officials from around the world present unsolved cases for review. Bender created a sculpture that he believed closely resembled the boy's father. The case received national attention when it was featured on the television show America's Most Wanted, but unfortunately, no substantial leads emerged. Nonetheless, the efforts to identify the boy persist. Numerous theories have been proposed over the years to solve the boy in the box case, like with most unsolved murders. While most of these theories have been dismissed, two possibilities have generated recent interest. The first theory, which was later disproven, revolved around a foster home located about a mile away from the vacant lot where the boy's body was discovered. In 1960, Remington Bristow, an employee of the medical examiner's office who tirelessly pursued the case until his death in 1993, sought the help of a psychic from New Jersey. The psychic advised him to search for a house that resembled the foster home. Remarkably, when the psychic arrived in the city, she led Bristow directly to the house in question. Refusing to let it go, Bristow conducted his own investigation. During an estate sale at the foster home, he came across a bassinet similar to the one sold at JCPenney. He also noticed blankets hanging on a clothesline that resembled the one used to wrap the boy's body. Bristow believed that the child belonged to the stepdaughter of the foster home's owner. According to his theory, the stepfather and the girl engaged in a sexual relationship, resulting in her pregnancy. The boy was hidden away, but when he accidentally died, the man disposed of his body to prevent the revelation of the girl's unwed motherhood, which was socially stigmatized in 1957. Despite the compelling but indirect evidence, the police couldn't establish any concrete connections between the foster family and the boy in the box. In 1998, Lieutenant Tom Augustine of the Philadelphia Police, who continues to lead the investigation, along with members of the VDOC Society, interviewed the stepfather and the daughter, who had since married him. The interview seemed to convince them that the family had no involvement in the case. Additionally, a DNA test ruled out the stepdaughter as the boy's mother, leading to the closure of the investigation into the foster home theory. Another theory surfaced in February 2002, shared by a woman known as M. She claimed that her abusive mother had bought the unidentified boy, referred to as Jonathan, from his birth parents in the summer of 1954. According to her account, the boy endured severe physical and sexual abuse for 2.5 years. Allegedly, her mother flew into a rage and killed the boy when he vomited in the bathtub. M stated that she then cut the boy's hair unevenly, explaining his ragged haircut, and disposed of his body in a secluded vacant lot. During the body's removal from the trunk, a passing male driver stopped to offer help, but they ignored him and he eventually drove away. This account aligned with confidential testimony given by a male witness in 1957. The police found the story quite plausible, but were skeptical due to M's history of mental illness. Neighbors who had access to the house also denied the existence of a young boy there, considering M's claims as baseless. On December 8, 2022, Philadelphia Police Department Commissioner Danielle Outlaw made an important announcement regarding the case. She revealed that the boy who was found dead in 1957 had been identified as Joseph Augustus Zarelli.
In his very short life, it was apparent that this child experienced horrors that no one should ever be subjected to.
Commissioner Outlaw stated that the community had always remembered the story of this child and that his memory was never forgotten. Using genetic genealogy, Zorelli's DNA was uploaded to genetic databases, leading detectives to find relatives on his mother's side. Through birth records, they also discovered the identity of his father. It was revealed that Zorelli's mother had 3 other children. However, many questions about Zorelli's life and death still remain unanswered. To respect the privacy of his living siblings, the police have chosen not to disclose the names of Zorelli's parents at this time. They also refrained from speculating on who might have been responsible for his death, but mentioned that they have suspicions. Commissioner Outlaw emphasized that the investigation is still active, and they seek the public's assistance in uncovering more details about this child's story. She noted that while this announcement closes one chapter, it opens a new one in the ongoing investigation. Although the case remains unresolved, it brings some comfort to know that the boy's identity has been discovered, and he can now receive a proper burial. What are your thoughts on this? Do you believe Martha's account? Share your thoughts in the comments below.
Police in Colorado say they have found 2 bodies they believe are the daughters of Christopher and Shanann Watts. Christopher Watts reportedly confessed Thursday to killing his pregnant wife and 2 daughters.
In a cruel twist of fate, Shanann Watts found herself caught in a chilling nightmare that shattered her once ideal life. A devoted mother pregnant with her 3rd child, and a family that had overcome financial hardships. Little did she know that her husband would transform into the most infamous and haunting modern-day serial killer. Join us as we delve into the harrowing story of Shanann Watts, a tale of love, betrayal, and a descent into darkness that defies comprehension. The summer of 2018 was supposed to be a joyful time for the Watts family. Chris Watts, 33 years old, and his wife Shanann, 34 years old, were excited to learn that they were expecting a baby boy to join their 2 daughters, 4-year-old Bella and 3-year-old Celeste, in their suburban home in Frederick, Colorado, just outside of Denver. While Chris worked as an operator at Anadarko Petroleum and Shanann traveled frequently for her job at a nutrition supplement company called Lavelle, their focus was on their daughters. Shanann often shared their family moments on Facebook, giving the impression of a happy suburban life. However, behind the scenes, Shanann's friends began hearing about troubles in their relationship. Little did anyone suspect the horrifying and brutal murders that were about to shatter their seemingly perfect life. Here's how it all unfolded. Everything began way back in 2010. Chris sent Shanann a friend request on Facebook, despite her being from Passaic, New Jersey, and him residing in North Carolina at the time. Shanann accepted the request, thinking she would never meet him. However, their connection grew over time, leading to a relationship. They eventually moved to Colorado and had 2 children together, making Chris the best thing that ever happened to Shanann, as she shares in a later Facebook video.
Bella, say hi. Bella, say hi.
Then on November 3rd, 2012, Shanann and Chris got married in Charlotte, North Carolina. A year later, their first child, a daughter named Bella Marie Watts, was born in Colorado on December 17, 2013. Shanann was overjoyed and grateful for this precious gift from God, treasuring every moment with her. Not long after, 2 years after their first daughter, on July 17, 2015, Shanann and Chris welcomed their second daughter, Celeste Catherine Watts, affectionately called Cece. She was born during the summer in Colorado. Shanann's battle with lupus makes the arrival of another child particularly meaningful, as she had been determined to stay healthy. Every moment spent with Celeste is cherished as a blessing, according to their family obituary. In June 2015, the couple faces financial difficulties and files for bankruptcy. Their combined income of $90,000 in 2014, along with credit card debt, student loans, and medical bills, led them to take this step. Their monthly expenses are $4,900, mostly allocated to their $3,000 mortgage and $600 car payments, put a strain on their finances. Furthermore, they faced legal action from their homeowners association due to unpaid fees. On May 5, 2018, Shanann shared a heartwarming Facebook Live video. Lasting over 31 minutes, she reflected on family life and expresses her joy in waking up on Saturdays and spending time with her loved ones. She talked about the upcoming summer in Colorado and shared her belief in the purpose behind life's events and the significance of the people we encounter. In the video, Kris can be seen playing with their daughters, creating happy moments together. 3 years after their second daughter, on June 11, 2018, Shanann surprised Kris with the news of their pregnancy in a video that was later released. Wearing a shirt that read, "Oops, we did it again," she shared the joyful announcement with him. Kris reacted positively, saying, "That's awesome." Then 6 days later, on Father's Day, Shanann posted a heartfelt message to Kris on Facebook. She expressed immense gratitude for his constant care and support, acknowledging the many things he did for their family, from handling laundry to looking after the kids. She credited him as the reason she felt brave enough to agree to have a third child. The message concludes by wishing Kris a happy Father's Day and emphasizing their luck in having him in their lives. But little did she know that the luck will run out soon enough. In June 2018, Kris began conversing with Nicole Kessinger, who works in the environmental department of Anadarko Petroleum, where Kris was an operator. They would often encounter each other while getting refreshments from the office fridge. Their initial conversation led to a meeting outside of the office later in the same month. But shortly after, in July, according to the Denver Post, Kris began a physical relationship with Kessinger. They saw each other about 4 or 5 times a week, and their involvement became intimate early in the month. Kris informed Kessinger that he is almost divorced, and later, when Shanann and their daughters are out of town, he told Kessinger that the divorce is finalized. As reported by Insider, their interactions progressed rapidly. They had their first meeting at Kris's home on July 4th, followed by their first recorded phone call on July 7th. They went on a date to the Shelby American Collection Car Museum on July 14th and spent a night together at Great Sand Dunes National Park on July 28th, all while Kris's family is away. On July 30th, Kris gave Kessinger a love note before he went to reunite with his family for their vacation. 3 days later, Kris went to North Carolina to join his family for their vacation. Texts forwarded by Shanann to a friend indicated tension and trouble in their relationship, including issues with Kris's parents. Next month, just weeks after starting their relationship, Kessinger spent 2 hours browsing online for wedding dresses, as revealed by her cell phone data. This indicates that Kris might have manipulated her into believing that he would marry her. On July 9th, Shanann departed on a business trip to Arizona after confiding in friends about her difficulties with Kris. She texted a friend before leaving, mentioning that she and Kris had their best talk yet. She even wrote a handwritten letter to him, expressing her thoughts and feelings. 3 days later, while Shanann is out of town, Kris hired a babysitter, claiming that he's going to a baseball game with his co-workers. However, instead of attending the game, he went to a bar with Kessinger. In the early hours the same day, around 1:48 a.m., Shanann returned from her business trip. Her friend Nicole Atkinson gave her a ride back home to their residence on the 2800 block of Saratoga Trail. That morning, Kris woke up Shanann while he was getting ready for work and wanted to discuss their marriage and future. In his later confession, he revealed that he disclosed his affair to Shanann and expressed his belief that their marriage was not going to last. In response, Shanann made a statement saying that Kris would not see their children again. This led to a heated confrontation, and in a moment of rage, Kris strangled Shanann to death. Their 4-year-old daughter Bella entered the room and asked what was happening to her mom. Kris wrapped Shanann's lifeless body in a blanket and placed her in his truck. He then put the two kids in the back seat and drove to his work site. Once there, Chris smothered Celeste in the back seat and disposed of her body in an oil tank. He repeated the same horrifying act with Bella, placing her body in another tank. Chris also buried his wife's body nearby, as he later admitted while in prison. The next day at around 1:40 p.m., Atkinson, a friend of Shanann's, became worried when she doesn't receive any response from her. Concerned about her well-being, Atkinson tried calling and texting Shanann multiple times. She knew that Shanann had a doctor's appointment that morning because she was pregnant, but Shanann didn't show up for it. Growing increasingly alarmed, Atkinson contacted the local police to report Shanann missing.
So my friend, we were out of town for a business trip this weekend.
Right.
And I dropped her off at 2 o'clock this morning. She's 15 weeks pregnant. She wasn't feeling well, and she had a doctor's appointment this morning at 9, and I told her to let me know if she needed me to take her. She's got 2 little girls.
During the welfare check conducted by the police, Shanann's phone, keys, and purse were found at her house. Chris, Shanann's husband, told the news stations that she mentioned going to a friend's house with the kids, but beyond that, he has no further information. His statement was vague and raised suspicion.
I want them here. Like, this house is not the same. I mean, last night was traumatic. Last night was...
The following day, on August 14th, as the Colorado Bureau of Investigation issued an endangered missing alert, Chris appeared on Denver's ABC affiliate and made a heartfelt plea for his family's return. He begs Shanann, Bella, and Celeste to come back, expressing his desperate need to see them again. Chris emphasizes that his house felt incomplete without them and urges anyone who may have them to bring them back. On August 15th, the FBI joined the search efforts for Shanann and her daughters. Chris undergoes a polygraph test, but fails it. He then confessed to his father Ronnie, and later to officials, that he killed Shanann. However, he deceitfully blamed Shanann for smothering their daughters as the reason for his horrifying actions. On August 16th, the bodies of Shanann, Bella, and Celeste are discovered at the location where Chris had been working. On the same day, Chris appeared in Weld County Court for a bond hearing, but is denied bail. Kessinger, Chris's former mistress, spoke to the police the same day and expressed her belief that Chris had been mentally unstable for a long time, even before their relationship began. She stated, "I genuinely think he was losing his mind before he met me." A week later, on August 21st, Chris was formally charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. In addition to those charges, he faced 2 more first-degree charges, specifically for victims who were 12 years old or younger. He is also charged with unlawfully terminating a pregnancy and tampering with the bodies, making a total of 9 charges against him. On September 1st, a funeral was held for Shanann and her daughters in Pinehurst, North Carolina. The ceremony took place at the Sacred Heart Catholic Church and lasted for about 90 minutes. The service began with a rendition of Amazing Grace, and notably, Chris is never mentioned during the proceedings. The priest read a statement from Shanann's father, Frank Zuchek, expressing his love for his daughter and referring to her as his little girl. On November 6th, Chris appeared in court and pleads guilty to all 9 charges against him. Shanann's family requested that the death penalty not be pursued in his case. On November 19th, Chris received his sentence. Judge Marcelo Kopkov described the murders as one of the most brutal and inhumane crimes he has ever encountered. Chris is handed 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole, along with additional years of imprisonment for unlawfully terminating Shanann's pregnancy and disposing of his family's bodies. In response to the tragedy, Shanann's parents filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Chris. Due to concerns for his safety, Chris is transferred from Colorado to the Dodge Correctional Facility in Warpen, Wisconsin on December 3rd. Then on February 18, 2019, during a 5-hour interview conducted from prison, Chris provided a detailed explanation of how he killed his daughters.
What they say specifically?
It was more like, what are you doing to mommy?
Okay.
He confessed to ending their lives and disposing of their bodies. Chris admitted to an overwhelming rage and losing control, describing the moment as the pinnacle of anger. He even revealed that his older daughter, Bella, questioned if he would do the same to her as he did to her sister. He further acknowledged that his 4-year-old daughter attempted to resist his actions by fighting back. On November 18, 2019, nearly a year after Shanann's parents initiated the civil lawsuit, a judge in Weld County, Judge Todd Taylor, decided that Chris is obligated to pay them $6 million. The amount is divided into $3 million for each death and an additional $3 million for the emotional suffering caused. The sum will continue to accumulate with an 8% interest rate. Although it's improbable that Shanann's parents will actually receive the money, this ruling ensured that Chris cannot benefit financially from the horrific murders in any manner. This is a story about taking a bad turn, where Valerie McDaniel came to understand that her deeds had been uncovered. Detectives in Houston had apprehended her and her boyfriend, Leon Jacob. They were charged with attempting to hire someone to harm their former partners. At this point, they were confronted with the potential of being sent to prison. Even though she was out on bail, McDaniel was still dealing with charges of planning murder. During this time, she wrote down her final wishes and recorded her thoughts on her iPad.
Hey, it's Valerie McDaniel. It's March 15th, 2017. I'm sitting outside and I wanted to take time and tell my story from the beginning.
In her recorded entries, she talked about her two main loves in life, her daughter and Leon.
She's the most precious thing to me.
She also admitted to a troubling secret.
The thing that I hope people know and I hope comes out is that at one point when I was talking to the officer, I said, can't you just talk to him and make him change, make him be nice to me? And he cut me off real quickly and said, no.
I never intended to harm anyone, McDaniel confesses in her final recording on March 25th, 2017.
I never wanted to hurt anyone. I hate the idea that everybody thinks I'm a monster.
2 days after that, McDaniel tragically jumped from her 7th floor balcony, leading to her death. This left Jacob to face a trial alone, determined by a jury. In the recent week, a jury found Jacob guilty on 2 charges of planning murder and sentenced him to life imprisonment. Valerie McDaniel worked as a veterinarian and lived in a luxury high-rise condo with 2 bedrooms in the upscale River Oaks neighborhood of Houston. Besides running her own veterinary clinic, she enjoyed spending weekends at her beach house on Tiki Island near Galveston. There, she often hosted gatherings for friends. Valerie had previously been married to her business partner, Marion Mack McDaniel. However, after being together for 17 years, they divorced. They agreed to jointly care for their 9-year-old daughter. According to friends, Valerie was unhappy in the marriage, and her husband was frequently absent. She used to be really hurt by her husband's actions, said Dr. Brittany King, a veterinarian who worked with Valerie McDaniel. Sometimes it would be just a text or a call, and she would end up in tears. It was really tough to see someone in that much pain. Her unhappiness continued until she met Leon Jacob, who was 9 years younger and the son of her neighbor and divorce lawyer. When I first met him, I didn't like his attitude at all, McDaniel recalled in a recorded conversation about meeting Jacob for the first time.
He ran up to me and introduced himself, the cockiest I ever met in my life, and I was completely turned off immediately by his attitude, and I was drawn to him but disgusted at the same time.
However, over time, Jacob managed to change her mind. McDaniel shared that their initial intimate encounter was like something from a movie. She described it as the most passionate, romantic moment in my life. Jacob moved into her condo and they began living together in early 2017. In an interview last year before his trial started, Jacob mentioned that they cooked together, shared their finances, and even told others they were going to get married. However, on March 27th, McDaniel made the tragic decision to end her own life. Jacob expressed that he was surprised as much as anyone and that there was nothing wrong, but Valerie McDaniel's friends had concerns about Jacob. He seemed very full of himself and overly confident, Valerie's close friend Maggie Whitley said. "I've never encountered anything quite like that. I usually have a strong gut feeling about people, and I had a bad feeling about him. I made sure to let her know." Some of Jacob's previous relationships were tumultuous, including the one he had with his ex-wife, Annie Jacob. He described their relationship as having both intense ups and downs. There were moments of fighting and moments of love in their relationship. He characterized it as one of those unions that people would view as a bit crazy, yet endearing. He expressed that outsiders would say they might be wild, but it's their own unique kind of wild, and we appreciate that. After being married for 11 years, Annie Jacob initiated a divorce in 2013. She later accused him of aggravated stalking and intimidation, leading to charges. Court documents revealed that he had made threatening calls, sent alarming texts and emails suggesting harm. Jacob defended himself, stating that the situation was exaggerated. He admitted to attempted cyber harassment and remarked that Annie had gone too far with her complaints about him. Jacob completed probation after being charged with attempted cyber stalking, and the other accusations against him were dropped. His professional journey had its own set of highs and lows. He graduated from medical school in Grenada in 2005. Afterward, he underwent surgical training in various residency programs at different hospitals. However, he never obtained a medical license and was eventually let go from his final program in Texas. Jacob relocated to Ohio and joined another residency program, but his superior reported that he provided false information about patient care post-surgery and displayed a lack of overall medical knowledge. This led to his dismissal from the program. Then in 2012, Jacob faced arrest for allegedly breaking into the home of a hospital administrator in Ohio. He later admitted guilt to criminal trespassing. By 2016, Jacob found himself in financial difficulties and had to file for bankruptcy. He returned to Houston and started dating Megan Verikas. In January 2017, police were called to their home following an incident. Verikas alleged that during an argument, Jacob forcefully grabbed her face, causing a wound on her lip. The police report indicated that Jacob admitted to placing his hand over her mouth. Jacob had a different perspective on the situation. "I didn't physically touch her. I never laid a hand on her," and the charge was eventually dropped due to lack of evidence. Though the assault charge was dismissed, in February 2017, Jacob faced stalking charges for following Verikas to her workplace after their relationship ended. He confessed that he continued to pursue her for a short time and acknowledged that he was present when the police arrived. During the same period when he was accused of stalking his ex-girlfriend, Jacob was already living with Valerie McDaniel. If he ended up being found guilty of the stalking accusation, it could seriously impact his chances of obtaining a medical license. Authorities claim that Jacob devised a plan to make Verikas vanish, aiming to have the stalking charge dismissed. Reportedly, Jacob offered $5,000 along with 2 Cartier watches and a laptop to a former US Army sergeant known as Zach, who also had a Purple Heart. This payment was intended as compensation for carrying out a hit on Megan. However, Zach took the money and disappeared without actually executing the task. When Jacob couldn't locate Zach, he sought assistance from bail bondsman Michael Kubosh. Not only did Kubosh secure Jacob's release from jail on bond following the stalking accusation, but he had also previously posted bail for Zach in an unrelated case. Jacob informed Kubosh that he had paid Zach a substantial sum of money to handle a situation. When asked about the specifics, Jacob revealed that he wanted Megan removed from the equation and sent away from the area. Kubosh, a city council member in Houston and a bail bondsman, recounted. He expressed his unsettling feelings about the conversation, describing Jacob's demeanor as alarming. Upon hearing Jacob's intentions, Kubosh promptly reached out to his police connections, leading to Megan being relocated to a secure location. Authorities successfully located Zach, who reportedly confessed that Jacob had enlisted him to eliminate Veracruz. Police convinced Zach to cooperate with their inquiry. With law enforcement monitoring the conversation, Zach contacted Jacob and followed a storyline provided by the police. He informed Jacob that he had delegated the hit task to another individual who was, in reality, an undercover officer named Javier. The motive for sidelining Zach and replacing him with Javier as the supposed hitman was to gather evidence by recording the conversation through audio or video, as stated by Javier. During the phone exchange between Zach and Jacob, authorities claim that Jacob escalated the situation. This was when it became apparent to the police that a second assassination request was being made. The intended target of this second plan was Valerie McDaniel's ex-husband, Mac McDaniel. Upon learning this, I was taken aback that Leon was seeking to have two individuals killed and that his girlfriend Valerie would also be implicated, noted Javier. In the account provided by Moss, it's mentioned that Jacob and Valerie McDaniel arranged a meeting with Zach and Javier at an Olive Garden restaurant to finalize a certain plan. During this meeting, Javier had the opportunity to meet Leon and Valerie for the first time. Javier aimed to gauge Leon's character and intentions. From their initial interaction, Javier perceived that Leon was committed to the idea of harming Megan and Mac. Javier learned from Leon that he held strong negative opinions about Valerie's ex-husband, considering him to be an abusive individual who mistreated Valerie. This ex-husband was allegedly pressuring Valerie by attempting to gain custody of their daughter. At one instance during their meal, Zach and Jacob exited the restaurant temporarily for a smoke break. This left McDaniel and Javier, who was acting as an undercover officer, alone at the table. During their one-on-one conversation, McDaniel eventually admitted that she indeed wanted harm to come to Mac. She provided detailed information to Javier, including Mac's car, his whereabouts, and residence. These details were quite personal, enabling Javier to locate him effectively. At this juncture, Javier introduced the concept of a $10,000 payment for the task. Valerie agreed to this payment, albeit in installments. The agreement was reached without direct quotation. According to the prosecutors, Valerie McDaniel had obtained a loan of $1.2 million to purchase her ex-husband's portion of the veterinary clinic as part of their divorce agreement. This left her in a tight financial situation. The police informed Mac McDaniel about the alleged plot against him. Cooperating with the authorities, Mac McDaniel agreed to participate in a plan where he would appear as if he had been killed in a carjacking gone awry. A fake gunshot wound was created on his head, and he was photographed sitting in a car with a slumped posture. Law enforcement also approached Megan Veracruz, who was Jacob's former girlfriend. She also agreed to take part in a similar scenario. Officers took a picture of her in a staged situation where it seemed like she had been abducted. In the photos, she was tied to a chair with zip ties on her wrists and ankles, and her mouth was covered with duct tape. Javier, who was working with Leon, recalled that Leon wanted Megan to be abducted and frightened to the extent that she would leave town and never return. Leon consistently used the word disappear. From Javier's perspective, this meant Leon desired Megan to be permanently removed, which Javier interpreted as wanting her harmed or even killed. The purpose of taking the photos was to provide evidence to Jacob and Valerie McDaniel that the plan to harm Mac McDaniel had been carried out. Javier got in touch with Jacob and informed him that he had important information. Jacob asked Javier to come to Valerie McDaniel's residence. Upon arrival, Valerie greeted Javier with a hug and a kiss on the cheek, which he found somewhat unusual. After communicating to Leon, who was believed to be the orchestrator of the plan, that Mac was no longer present, Javier offered to show Leon a picture as proof. However, Leon declined to see any evidence. Nevertheless, the police assert that Leon then gave Javier $1,800 in cash, serving as a partial payment for the task. Later on that same night, Javier reached out to Leon again to inform him that Megan had also been harmed as per the plan. The pretense carried on as police arrived at Valerie McDaniel's apartment after midnight to inform her that her ex-husband had been discovered deceased. Jacob was also present in the apartment during this time. Equipped with body cameras, the officers aimed to capture the reactions of the couple. Reportedly, both of them acted surprised by the news, and Jacob provided an alibi about where they were even before officers inquired. Once the investigators were confident they had gathered enough evidence, they arrested Jacob and McDaniel on charges of solicitation of capital murder. Before her arrest, officers allowed Valerie McDaniel to collect her daughter, who was asleep in her bedroom at the moment. She handed her off to her ex-husband waiting in the hallway. This was done even though she had just been informed that he was alive, contrary to what she believed. After being in custody for 3 days, Valerie McDaniel was released on a $50,000 bond. She spent time with friends, but mostly stayed in her apartment, recording her thoughts on her iPad. In one of her recorded entries, McDaniel denied that she woke up one day with the intention of killing her ex-husband. She expressed that she didn't truly want to do it. However, prosecutors asserted that McDaniel indeed wanted her ex-husband to be killed. They stated that she confessed to hiring the hitman after her arrest while she was with officers in the hallway of her apartment. During this confession, officers had to repeatedly instruct her to speak audibly and affirmatively. McDaniel's friend, Maggie Whitley, believed that McDaniel would not have pursued the alleged hit without Jacob's influence. Whitley was of the opinion that this situation happened to McDaniel rather than her actively choosing it. She perceived that McDaniel was subjected to a constant stream of negativity from Jacob regarding her ex-husband. Whitley recounted receiving inappropriate messages from McDaniel's phone, which she suspected were sent by Jacob. Another former colleague of McDaniel, Dr. Brittany King, mentioned that Jacob used to answer McDaniel's calls on her behalf. Whitley believed that Jacob employed manipulative tactics to exert control over McDaniel, using her desire for affection and attention to his advantage. Jacob refuted the idea that he isolated McDaniel from her friends, explaining that early in a new relationship, couples often spend more time together, which can lead to a temporary distancing from others. Jacob faced charges of solicitation of capital murder related to the plot he and McDaniel devised. He pleaded not guilty to these charges. Jacob described the charges against him as terrible, asserting that he wasn't a monstrous person seeking harm to his ex-girlfriend and her former husband. He claimed to be naturally inclined towards healing. Jacob distanced himself from McDaniel's suicide, stating that it was her personal choice. He had requested permission to attend McDaniel's funeral, which was denied. At the commencement of his trial, Jacob's lawyers argued that he believed he was hiring a private investigator to assist in rekindling his relationship with Veracruz, not orchestrating a hit on her. After his mother testified in his defense, Jacob took the stand himself. However, prosecutors challenged his claims of affection for Veracruz by presenting undercover recordings in which he suggested causing harm to her. Jacob seemed unprepared and unsure while responding to incriminating statements. Following a short deliberation, the jury declared Jacob guilty of both counts of solicitation of capital murder.
We, the jury, find the defendant Leon Philip Jacob guilty of solicitation of capital murder as charged in the indictment. We, the jury, find the defendant Leon Philip Jacob guilty of solicitation of capital murder as charged in the indictment.
He was subsequently sentenced to life in prison and ordered to pay a fine of $10,000. Beyond the glitz and glamour of shows like Family Feud lies a story that starts with a seemingly harmless moment on the screen and unfolds into a tragic, real-life nightmare. A contestant that became famous on the show by saying the only regret on his wedding day was that he said, "I do," became engulfed in controversy.
What's the biggest mistake you made at your wedding?
Honey, I love you, but said I do.
Let's take a more detailed look at how everything unfolded. Rebecca Bliefnick, also known as Becky, was born in November 1981 in Quincy, Illinois. She did really well in school. Becky was the top student when she graduated from Quincy Notre Dame High School. She continued her education at Quincy University and got a degree in biological science with a minor in chemistry. Becky's professional journey started in pharmaceutical sales at Sanofi Aventis, where she was really good and made a lot of sales. But her true passion was nursing, so she went to Blessing Ryman College of Nursing and Health Sciences. She did really well and graduated with top honors. During her career, she worked as a dedicated nurse in different roles, including being a travel nurse during the tough times of the COVID pandemic. Outside of work, Becky was also really involved in her community. She volunteered at St. Peter's Grade School Association and helped out with an animal rescue group. She even planned to volunteer at Quest Stables to help with horse riding for therapy. When she was studying at Quincy University, Becky met Timothy Bliefnick, who was a well-known college football player and later became a part of the university's Hall of Fame. They started a relationship and got married in 2009 in Fort Wayne, Indiana, before coming back to Quincy, where they bought a home on Kentucky Road and had 3 beautiful children. Their family was always really close and happy. Timothy worked as a sales executive at Quincy Farm Products, and Becky was happy with her job at Blessing Hospital. However, after 10 years of marriage, things started to change. Even though Becky loved being with her boys and shared pictures of their family moments online, their relationship started to show some problems. By February 2019, they decided to separate. Becky stayed in their home, and Tim rented a house nearby on Hampshire Street. They shared taking care of their kids. During their separation in May 2019, Tim and some relatives went to Los Angeles to be on the TV show Family Feud.
Honey, I love you, but said I do. For goodness sake, I love my wife.
For the Bliefnick family, this was an event that happened during this time. It was a really great experience for them. Wow, we're here at the Wagon for the Family Feud viewing party. Our family went last May to tape the show, and today we finally get to watch it. I'm so excited. It was amazing. Steve Harvey was really good. The whole thing was so cool, being on the stage with our names in lights. Steve Harvey and the competition was really fun. We had a blast. Meanwhile, back in Quincy, Tim's short time of being on TV ended, but his problems in his marriage didn't. The years that followed were filled with frequent arguments about taking care of the kids, money, and more problems. The Bliefnick family couldn't agree on anything, big or small, so it wasn't a surprise to either of them when Tim asked for a divorce in January 2021. After Tim filed the legal papers, things got even worse between them. The state had to step in and choose someone to look out for the kids' well-being. They chose attorney Rick Zimmerman to do this. Later in court, he talked about what he saw in the Bliefnick family's relationship at that time. On February 10th, Tim reached out to the Quincy Police Department. He asked them to return a 9mm handgun to Becky on his behalf, as he didn't want to give it to her directly. However, the police declined his request. 5 days later, both Tim and Becky received notifications from the family court that their divorce was scheduled for final hearings on March 3rd. This court date presented an opportunity to resolve their legal issues and start moving forward. After Tim texted Becky's father, expressing concern for Becky's health, her father became worried. Tim informed him that Becky, who had recently undergone abdominal surgery, wasn't feeling well and wasn't responding. Tim also wanted to know who would pick up their children from school. Becky's father decided to check on her. Upon arriving at Becky's home, he found the front door open and her car in the garage. As he walked through the house, he entered the bedroom and was devastated to discover Becky's lifeless body on the bathroom floor. Rigor mortis had already set in, indicating her tragic fate. He called 911 around 3:30 p.m. and a patrol officer arrived within 3 minutes. The officer noticed signs of forced entry on the bedroom door. Becky's body was found in the bathroom with multiple gunshot wounds and several shell casings nearby. The officer alerted the police department's Criminal Investigation Division. They began processing the crime scene, investigating the area, and reviewing surveillance footage. On the morning of March 1st, 2023, which was 8 days after Becky's passing, Tim Bliefnick was pulled over by the police. This happened just 2 blocks from his home. The police served him with search warrants for his house and car. Tim handed over his keys and was taken to a relative's house while detectives and officers searched his rented home and car. It's important to mention that Tim was not arrested during this encounter. Police records show that he was cooperative throughout. The evidence gathered from Tim's home, car, and the crime scene was then sent to the Illinois State Police Crime Lab in Springfield for analysis. Becky Bliefnick's funeral took place on Friday, March 3rd, 2023 at 10 a.m. at St. Peter's Church. On March 13th, which was 12 days after the search warrants were executed, and following the receipts of results from the crime lab, the Quincy Police Department held a press conference to provide updates on the ongoing investigation. The final minute of Becky's life wasn't spent surrounded by her 3 children's loving embrace. Those last moments weren't filled with love, care, and tenderness. Instead, they were marked by fear, agony, and terror. As she lay on the bathroom floor's cold tiles, her life was slipping away from her due to bleeding. Just moments before, Becky had heard the upstairs bedroom window shatter. Unbeknownst to her, someone was breaking into that window at that very moment, using a crowbar to force it open. All she realized was that she was alone at home. No one else should have been inside. Her 3 boys were supposed to be at their father's house nearby. She rushed into her bedroom, slammed the door shut, and tried frantically to dial a number on her phone. However, the bedroom door was forcefully kicked open, the frame giving way. In her panic, the phone slipped from her hand. The last number she tried to dial, 911, seeking help. As the door burst open, she fled to her bathroom, turning around just in time to hear a gunshot, and then she collapsed onto the floor. Lying on her back, she faced the eyes of her attacker. Eyes she had gazed into before. Eyes that had once made promises of "till death do us part." Those eyes belonged to her murderer, her husband, the defendant. He aimed a gun at her, and then he fired, not once, twice, or thrice, but 14 times, filling her body with bullets. Afterwards, he fled the scene, leaving Becky to die alone on the floor. But his errors didn't start and end on the day of the incident. In January 2023, just weeks before Becky's death, he asked a neighbor if their backyard was under video surveillance. Remember how Becky didn't want the defendant's father around their boys? On February 23, 2023, the defendant took a Little Tykes basketball hoop to his father's house, the same day Becky was killed. He also picked up the boys from school an hour early, which was unusual. The police examined the defendant's computer, phone, and fitness armband. They discovered searches on his phone, including inquiries about opening doors with a crowbar, homemade pistol silencers, police response times, gun registration, and cleaning gunpowder off hands. These details suggest that he might have been preparing or planning something. From the same phone, there was evidence that the defendant was researching how to open a window using a crowbar. And on February 23, 2023, he searched for how to escape if trapped in a basement. These searches raise questions about his intentions and actions leading up to that day. As additional evidence, previously Becky had sent a warning text message to one of her friends.
If something ever happens to me, please make sure the #1 person of interest is Tim. as that is who would do something to me.
Then in May, just 2 months later, a verdict was reached. The prosecutors claimed that Beefnik had used Google to find information about committing a murder. He had ridden a bike from where he was staying, which was around a mile away, to her house. He managed to open a window on the second floor using a crowbar and then shot his wife. Detective Eric Cowick from the Quincy Police Department testified about this. Mr. Beefnik was sentenced by Judge Robert Adrian of Adams County, Illinois.
You researched this murder, you planned this murder, you practiced this murder, you broke into her house, and you shot her. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 times.
The judge noted that some of these shots were fired while the victim was on the ground. I'm not sure how much time it took you to do this, but some of those shots hit her while she was lying down, the judge added. All of this happened while your children were upstairs in your home, sleeping peacefully in their beds. After being arrested and put on trial in May, Beefnik was found guilty of first-degree murder by the jury following a week-long trial.
The peaceful and content life of a devout Christian family of 5 took an unforeseen turn one fateful night. In this remarkable tale, we'll delve into the extraordinary story of Amanda and Billy Cope and the profound impact it had on their family. Prepare to embark on a journey marked by a grievous miscarriage of justice, replete with unexpected plot twists and intricate complexities. Let's begin. It was November 29th, 2001, in Rock Hill, South Carolina, when 37-year-old Billy Cope discovered the lifeless body of his daughter, Amanda, in her bedroom during the early hours of the morning. At around 3 a.m., Billy abruptly woke up, sensing that something was amiss within his household. Notably, the hallway light was illuminated, despite his recollection of having turned it off before retiring to bed. His wife, Mary Sue, was away at her overnight job, leaving Billy alone with their 3 daughters, Amanda, aged 12, Jessica, aged 11, and Kyla, aged 7. Being a devoutly Christian family, they had foregone their usual Wednesday church service that night to assist Jessica with her math homework. Amanda, the caring older sister, had offered her help, and Billy consented to allow the girls to stay up until their task was complete. The youngest daughter, Kyla, had retired to bed at 9 p.m., while Billy stayed up with the 2 older girls until 1 a.m., assisting them with their schoolwork. Subsequently, everyone retired to bed, with Billy utilizing a CPAP breathing machine to manage his sleep apnea. Strangely, just 2 hours later, Billy was startled awake. In a drowsy state, he proceeded to check on his daughters. Finding Amanda's door closed, he speculated that she might have been the one to switch on the hallway light, possibly having risen for a drink of water. The door to the other bedroom was open, revealing a peaceful slumber of his 2 younger daughters. Feeling somewhat reassured, Billy returned to his bed, reattached his breathing machine, and promptly fell back asleep. The following morning, at 6 a.m., he was rudely awakened by the blaring of his alarm clock. He later mentioned that during the intermittent moments of sleep, he had dreamt about the rapture. In his dream, Jesus had come to gather his followers, and he witnessed Amanda being taken, while he was left behind, bidding her farewell with the words, "Bye, Daddy." Still shaken from the intensity of his dream, Billy hastened to check on his daughters. The sight of his younger girls still peacefully asleep in their beds initially brought him relief, but it was short-lived. When he attempted to open Amanda's door, it became entangled with the closet door, requiring force to gain entry. In that harrowing moment, he was confronted with an unbearable scene: Amanda's lifeless body lying motionless on her bed. As he reached out to touch her, he felt the chilling coldness, confirming his worst nightmare. In a state of shock, he covered her lifeless form and, overwhelmed with grief, dialed 911.
Is she breathing?
Oh, no, she's dead. She's cold as a cucumber. And
Okay, you don't want to try to CPR or anything on her?
no, ma'am, she's dead. I mean, her mouth is completely shut. She's ice cold.
In his initial statement to the police, Billy Cope recounted that he woke up around 6 a.m., called out his daughter's name, and upon receiving no response, decided to check on her. It was during this check that he tragically discovered his daughter's lifeless body on the floor of her own bedroom and promptly called 911 for assistance. Based on the absence of signs of forced entry and what they perceived as a lack of emotional display, the police considered Cope a suspect. He underwent 2 interviews before being released, only to be brought in for a 3rd session later that same night, which extended into the following morning and ultimately resulted in Cope's imprisonment. Throughout more than 24 hours of persistent interrogation, Cope maintained his innocence, despite voluntarily waiving his Miranda rights and offering to undergo a polygraph test on 5 separate occasions. Following an overnight stay in jail, he was subjected to a polygraph examination the next morning, which he successfully passed. However, the officers informed him that he had failed the polygraph, leading to the continuation of the interrogation. Astonished, devastated, and bewildered by the results, Cope questioned aloud whether it was possible to commit such a horrific crime and have no recollection of it, a notion that the interrogator had previously suggested. Overwhelmed, Cope broke down and confessed to the crime, stating, "I must have done it." He proceeded to provide a detailed account of how he molested and strangled his daughter. This initial confession was sealed. 2 days later, Cope provided the police with a second written confession in which his story had changed. He now claimed that he had raped and killed his daughter while dreaming about an ex-girlfriend who had undergone an abortion. In compliance with the police, Cope returned to the house to reenact the events of that tragic night. Subsequently, the police drafted a comprehensive, detailed narrative of the murder, which Cope signed, constituting his 3rd confession. However, the evidence did not align with Cope's confessions. Dr. Maynard, the physician who performed Amanda's autopsy, disclosed the presence of bite marks on the child's right breasts, and semen was found in her pants, indicating evidence of sexual assault. Both samples were tested and did not match Cope. Instead, they matched James Sanders, a sex offender residing across the street who had previously committed similar crimes. Yet, within days of receiving the results, the police falsely informed Cope's wife that the semen matched her husband's perfectly. Desperate to extract another confession, the police went through extreme lengths, even wiring Cope's wife and sending her to jail. Nonetheless, Cope did not confess. Tragically, Cope's wife passed away during surgery, unaware of the deception that had torn their world apart. Despite a detailed confession lacking supporting evidence, the prosecutor accused Cope of conspiracy, alleging that he had exploited his daughter by involving Sanders. This accusation primarily relied on Cope's confession and the absence of signs of forced entry. During the trial, the prosecutors relied on a female friend of Cope's late wife as their primary source of evidence. She claimed to have received 2 handwritten notes from Cope confessing to the crime. However, Cope denied writing these notes, and it was determined that he did not have access to the materials used or match the handwriting attributed to him. Additionally, the credibility of the witness was questionable, as she had previously faced forgery charges, rendering this evidence inadmissible. To support his defense, Cope presented expert testimony from Dr. Sal Kassan, who discussed false confessions. Dr. Kassan argued that the interrogation techniques employed by the police were unethical and should be dismissed. Specifically, 5 inappropriate tactics were highlighted. False evidence. Officers falsely informed Cope that he had failed the polygraph despite him actually passing the test. Positive confrontation. Offers asserted their belief that Cope was guilty. Refusal to accept denial. Despite Cope's cooperation with a polygraph and waiver of an attorney, the officers disregarded his denial of guilt. Minimization. Officers suggested that the crime may have been accidental. Interrogation under duress. Cope was questioned while traumatized and fatigued. Dr. Casson referenced similar cases of false confessions, such as those of Peter Riley and Gary Gager, who confessed to crimes they did not commit after being falsely led to believe they were guilty due to polygraph results. However, the court ruled that these cases were irrelevant to the present trial and deemed the testimony inadmissible. Although Sanders had a history of committing rapes and killings in a manner similar to the victim in this case, the court refused to admit evidence of his previous crimes, as evidence of other crimes is typically not admissible to determine the defendant's character. The testimony of James Hilly, a convicted burglar, claimed to recognize Sanders' distinct voice from overhearing him in prison, bragging about getting away with raping and killing a young girl in the Rock Hill area. However, this testimony was deemed irrelevant since it did not provide specific details about the time or location of the alleged confession. In the end, prosecutors asserted that Cope knowingly permitted James Sanders, his neighbor, to enter his home with the intention of attacking his daughter. They further claimed that Cope himself had previously assaulted the girl. Consequently, both Cope and Sanders were convicted of murder and handed life sentences without the possibility of parole. Cope's defense attorneys contended that the prosecution had manipulated the evidence to wrongfully imprison an innocent man. They argued that Cope, who suffered from mental issues, was so emotionally devastated by his daughter's death that the investigators were able to exploit him into confessing to a crime he did not commit. However, the state Supreme Court upheld Cope's conviction in 2013, and the case was subsequently declined by the U.S. Supreme Court. Cope's defense attorney expressed their profound disappointment in their inability to secure his release from prison, considering him a married father of 3. In a statement shared on the Facebook page, Free Billy Wayne Cope, they wrote, "Billy's death marks a sad end to a horrible miscarriage of justice." Prosecutors maintained that the Cope residence in Rock Hill was securely locked when 12-year-old Amanda was discovered strangled to death, suggesting that someone must have granted Sanders access. In response, the defense attorneys argued that the lock on the home's door could easily be manipulated with a credit card or driver's license. In a statement to the Daily News, Cope's defense team expressed their deep disappointment at their inability to save him from this tragic fate, considering it one of the most profound letdowns of their lives and careers. Cope passed away in prison at the age of 53 in 2017 due to natural causes, steadfastly maintaining his innocence until the end. The core issue in Cope's trial is not whether an innocent man was wrongly convicted, although there is a strong possibility of his innocence based on available evidence. The undeniable victim in this case is Amanda Cope. The main problem lies in the coercive interrogation tactics employed by the police officers, which ultimately resulted in Cope's confession. These techniques, while deceitful and inappropriate, are legally permissible. Despite their ethical concerns, they do not violate the law. Consequently, Cope's confession could not be dismissed, since these techniques are not illegal. Coupled with the circumstantial evidence presented, his confession alone was sufficient for a conviction of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Before concluding, please consider liking this video if you found it enjoyable, and subscribe to our channel for future content. We also encourage you to share your thoughts on whether you believe Billy was innocent or not in the comment section down below.